into the end zone again is Amari Daniels, his second of the day. Second goal, and add to it. Le'Veon Moss, 1-yard touchdown run. Le'Veon Moss, and A&M just keeps rolling. Look at big Le'Veon Moss. He's going to house it to open up the second half. The Aggies can do no wrong today.
Yeah, just a really poor performance by my football team, and it starts with me, and I apologize to our fans. It's my responsibility for us to be better, and that the start of the first half, not being able to convert third downs, not being able to stop them on third down, ultimately the difference in the game.
That was Eli Drinkowitz, a very sad Eli Drinkowitz on Saturday afternoon after his team was beat. Double checks the score one more time, 41-10. 41-10. Was I just punked? Did Saturday really happen? Like, I was waiting for Ashton Kutcher to come out of my basement closet and be like, you're on punked. Mizzou still hasn't played yet. But no, it wasn't, T-Bone. And with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Yeah, I did just make an Ashton Kutcher reference because that's how bad the weekend was for the Missouri Tigers.
I enjoyed it personally.
I know you did, buddy. I know you did. And I know our buddy Jackson was not doing well when we walked into the studio today.
It is always tough for Mizzou fans to realize Illinois is a better football team.
Well, and Jackson also went straight to the basketball, and it's like, Jackson, that's not where I'm going to go with this one. Apparently, the Air Comfort Service text line is just treating Jackson really well today. So that's good to know. It's off and running. You can jump in on that, 314-399-9646. We're also live up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Mizzou was just proven frauds over the weekend. Plain and simple. You went into that game as a 9 seed. Is that what it was in the AP poll? You were 9. You dropped all the way to 21 after that loss.
They're lucky to be in the top 25.
They're lucky to be in the top 25 because you didn't just lose to Texas A&M. You got whooped. Offensively, you had nothing going. What were they outgained, T-Bone? It was 512 to 254 yards. You ended the first half down by 24 and thinking, okay, you can adjust because 4 scores. We've seen the Missouri Tigers find ways to get back into those games before. And then what did? They opened up the second half with just a massive run down the middle of the field into the end zone to add on to it. I know that I was very optimistic this season that the Missouri Tigers did what they needed to do in terms of bringing in the right transfers. They had the right players. You had a dynamic offense. Yes, you lost your defensive coordinator, but you felt like you could make up for it. But after watching that game, it's pretty hard to deny that I'm not sure Mizzou is a playoff team this season, because that's the type of game that you look at and you say, I understand that everybody has bad games, but that was a game that you had 2 weeks to prepare for, and you went into the road and looked like you hadn't prepared for that at all.
Yeah, that's an embarrassing loss for the Missouri Tiger football program. And, I mean, you mentioned the fact that they just got blown out. Let's not forget they had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. They were off last week, and then they go out and they have a no-show against Texas A&M. Look, a top 10 team in the country goes into that game. It may end up being close. And you know what? It's fair to even look at it. And I think A&M was a 2.5-point favorite going into that game. Yeah. It's also, if you're a top 10 team, you should go in and take care of business. And as we saw, they did not. They were overmatched in that football game. They could not protect Brady Cook throughout. The pass rush of A&M was all over Brady Cook and causing all kinds of problems. Defensively, they had no answers. They couldn't stop the run. They really couldn't stop the pass. They didn't need to use the pass that much because they kicked the crap out of them on the ground. And then offensively, you can't run the football. We mentioned that Brady Cook was under pressure, but he also wasn't good when he had time. And we saw the frustration from Luther Burden having the towel on his head on the sidelines. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong in that football game. And I think it does seem to signal to you, hey, all the concerns we had in the previous 4 games in which the Tigers won, we talked about it. You know, there was a little concern after the Vanderbilt game where they really struggled in that one. Boston College, again, a little closer than you expected. But remember, our concerns on the offensive side of the football went all the way back to the Murray State game, where it was, hey, just something's off right now. Brady Cook's not hitting on these deep balls like he did a year ago. If you go to the Buffalo game, they win that game easily. We said, hey, it feels off, doesn't it? Doesn't it feel like something's not right here? Sure, they're able to run the ball, but you're going to win those matchups going against those non-power 4 teams. Now you're starting to see that. They couldn't establish a run against A&M on the road. And we're now seeing that the passing game and the concerns and the lack of explosive plays, seems to be a legitimate concern. And everything, once again, seemed off for Brady Cook. Now, maybe it was he was rushed a little bit because the offensive line couldn't protect him. But the biggest fears that I had about Missouri and the lack of explosiveness from the offense really came to be true this weekend and really showed that they have the potential of, hey, this offense is going to have to figure things out, or they could be in for I'm not going to say a long season, but definitely a season in which it becomes disappointing and they miss the college football playoffs.
So this was the text we just got from the 636. So labeling them frauds after one loss. Are Alabama and Tennessee frauds too? We'll talk about this a little bit later. College football is wide open right now.
And to be fair, Alabama beat freaking Georgia.
Yeah, and then lost to Vanderbilt. But here's the thing. At what point this season did you see an offense that said that's a top 10 team in college football? Take out Murray State and Buffalo because...
Even then, let's be honest, it wasn't a top 10 offense in those games.
I mean, Murray State, that was more your defense than anything. Buffalo, you never really had that big play, but go off of the competitive games. You scored 27 points against Boston College, but going into the half, you were up by 3, I believe that was. Vanderbilt, you got out of that by the hair of your chinny chin chin in overtime, and offensively you still didn't have any big ones. And then Saturday you had 186 yards. Brady Cook made 13 completions and had 1 touchdown. Now look, a lot of things are going wrong for Missouri in that game. There were a lot of flags. You had 1 touchdown that was called back because of a player downfield, ineligible player downfield. Defensively, you didn't have a great performance. You still allowed those big 60-yard plays that resulted in touchdowns multiple times. And offensively, scheme-wise, it just felt like they were always trying to get too greedy with plays downfield. It never was, all right, let's go back to what works for us. Let's run the ball a little bit, because they were losing in the trenches. So, yeah, after one game, I can sit there and say that they're frauds because you're not a top 10 team. And don't believe me, listen to Paul Feinbaum. Some people might not want to listen to Paul Feinbaum, but he was on the Matt Berry show yesterday. This is what he said. Missouri has not proven anything. They've played into the perception of Missouri being a fraudulent top 10 team. They're a good team. They're just a fraudulent top 10 team. I don't see their road back. They have Alabama in a couple of weeks in a game that has suddenly got real mysterious. I'm not saying Mizzou is a bad team. All I'm saying is you're not a top 10 team because your offense has not shown me top 10 offense at all this season. And you're past the point where we can sit here and say, well, Brady Cook will get there. I don't know if Brady Cook will. And it's not all on him. The offensive line sure doesn't keep him protected very well. 100%. But the connection between he and his wide receivers, the scheme plays in terms of offense to where it just seems like they don't have those big bursts of offense. It's hard to sit there and look at that and say, yeah, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, and people pointing to Bama, who lost this weekend, and to Vanderbilt, who, again, gave Mizzou a run for their money as well, which I can understand you making that argument. But Alabama has won at home against Georgia. You look at Tennessee, people say, well, what has Tennessee done? Tennessee's got 2 top 25 victories, really one. NC State's one of the worst teams I've seen in the Power 4 conferences. But they won at number 15 Oklahoma. That was essentially, because Oklahoma's in the back half of the top 25, that was essentially your game you just had. Which was, okay, we're on the road. It's a tough road environment, but we're going up against a top 25 team. Back in top 25 team. Tennessee took care of business. Now, I know they lost on the road this weekend at Arkansas, but Tennessee took care of business. Missouri did not. In Missouri, people will point to and say, well, they beat Boston College. That's a top 25 win. Yeah, okay, at the time it was. Boston College has since lost to Virginia.
At the end of the season, I don't think the committee is going to look at that and say, well, they did get a top 25 win.
Yes, you look at this Missouri team from a year ago. I mean, they take care of business at home against Kansas State. They go on the road, basically the same scenario, different environment, a lot tougher to play at College Station than it is at Kentucky. No offense, Kentucky. But they went on the road at number 24 Kentucky, and we talked about that game last week. They won that game 38-21. Like, it's just different. Right now, they don't have the resume to look back on and say, hey, yeah, this is a top 10 team. This is a top 15 team right now from the Missouri Tigers. Again, they're lacking offensive explosiveness right now. Defensively, they got exposed this weekend to where you have to question of how this defense is going to hold up by the time they get deeper into conference play. It's not a top 10 team. They were exposed as frauds this weekend. It's just the bottom line, and we'll see if they recover. But, man, they are now playing without a mulligan in their back pocket as they've got 2 top 25 teams still left on their schedule. And they don't have a very favorable schedule to where you can just look at it and say, okay, well, even if 2 losses, they have a resume they can go back on. No, they don't.
Yeah.
They've got one of the easiest schedules for Power 4 teams in the country so far this year.
Well, and the good news for Mizzou, and again, we'll get into this a little bit later, like, you talk about a bad day for you. It's a bad day for a lot of teams in the SEC and just college football in general, which does at least leave the window open for this Mizzou team. But here's the other factor into this. Mizzou goes on the road against UMass. It's UMass. I'm not too worried about that one. But you got a road game against Alabama, a road game against South Carolina, and a road game against Mississippi State. A lot of those teams, they don't look great. You look like the team that should be favored in that game. But T-Bone brought this to my attention earlier. Little concerning if you're a Missouri Tigers fan of what this team looks like on the road under Eli Drinkwitz.
Why, is it bad?
Now, this
Should I worry about the game at UMass next weekend?
Well, this feels a lot like when the Blues are like, hey, the team wins 600 winning percentage when Pavel Buchnevich is at the center position. But in true road games, the Missouri Tigers under Eli Drinkwitz is 6-12.
That's not ideal.
No, it's not ideal. You had 2 weeks to prepare for this one, and you get smashed at Texas A&M, and you've got a couple of significant road games throughout the rest of the season. You still got an opportunity to at least get the rest of your job done this season. But, man, if you can't figure it out on the road with 2 weeks to prep for Texas A&M, how am I supposed to believe you're going to figure it out when you go on the road against Alabama?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I do kind of look at his road woes as kind of, okay, it doesn't shock me that his road record was bad in true road games early on because Drink didn't have, his roster. You think back to his first 2-3 years, it wasn't completely his. Now it's all his, and last year they went 3-1 on the road in true road games. Now, this year's not off to an ideal start by getting clobbered by Texas A&M, but it is something to continue to keep an eye on because you're right. I mean, it's only going to get harder from here. Texas A&M, don't get me wrong, that's a tough place to go play in no matter what Texas A&M's record is. It's no Alabama when they go on the road to Alabama. And you're right. They should be favored in most of their games the rest of the way until you get to basically at Alabama. Oklahoma, I still think they should be favored. I don't think Oklahoma's very good. But at Alabama, at South Carolina, who's been a little feisty so far in SEC play, it's no cakewalk. At Mississippi State should be a cakewalk. They're terrible. But
I've said that a couple of times.
Those two other road games that they've got at Alabama, at South Carolina, I mean, first off, at Alabama now is a must-win for the Missouri Tigers. And then at South Carolina is just the classic pass-fail test. I don't care how you leave that game. You need to leave that game with a W next to your name. So it's interesting that Drinkwitz has had these struggles on the road. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's preparation, what exactly you can point to and say this is why they're losing on the road. But the fact that you had 2 weeks to prepare for A&M on the road, we heard Brady Cook talk about how loud it's going to be with their practice.
Wasn't smart.
That did not age well. There was no reason to not be prepared for that game at Texas A&M. And we'll see if the road woes continue for them when they've got 3 more games on the road in conference play.
We got a text that asks, if you only lose to Alabama the rest of the way, does that make Missouri a playoff team? We'll get to that at 12 o'clock. Plenty of college football to get into throughout the show today. All we're saying, though, is you're not a top 10 team after what we just witnessed against Texas A&M. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll take a break. When we come back, the Blues seemingly have their opening night roster set. Now, the roster's not due till 5 p.m. There still could be some surprises, but let's just hypothetically say this is the roster. How much more improved is this roster compared to what last year was on opening night? We'll discuss that next, and what role Scott Perunovich is going to have next on 101 ESPN. Along with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. No BK today, who was filling in on the morning show. He'll be back with us tomorrow when the Blues open up their regular season, T-Bone.
Finally.
Hot damn, we're here.
Something
we're
to
here.
get excited about.
And it's a 3:30 game. Me and Graham Francis were celebrating. Don't look at the schedule for Thursday and Friday when we play at 9:30 and 9 o'clock.
I could get excited about a 3:30 game.
Everybody could get excited for that one. We're home by 7. It's a great 9. Blues victory as well. But, okay, a little too far out of my skis. I understand.
They've got the Sharks. They'll win that one.
Oh, God. It tells you how much I've mentally blocked out the San Jose Sharks from last season. I was with Tanner in the office, and I said, so they played Seattle Tuesday, and they got Vegas Friday. Who do they play on Thursday? And people's like, San Jose. And go, oh, okay, that makes sense why I didn't remember who they play. So the Blues yesterday, after that game in Milwaukee on Saturday, where they got beat, 6-2? Makes sense. They sent literally nobody to that game, but they sent all of the players on. I think there were 10 total players that were sent to the American Hockey League. Most notable was Zach Dean, who was still on the roster. He gets sent down. Makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people were anticipating that. Yesterday also, the Blues sent Tyler Tucker down, and we have to wait until about 12 o'clock today to find out if he clears waivers, which tells you that the Blues are using 8 defensemen. Scott Perunovich, P.O. Joseph remain on this roster. But the forward group seemingly is set, which means Zach Bolduc more than likely is making this opening night roster. Is he in the lineup? I don't expect so. There's going to be some maneuvering of this roster with the potential of Brandon Saad and his wife having a baby, so he might not be on this road trip. Does he go on the bereavement list? Oscar Sundqvist might not be eligible to start the season. So there's still some wiggling with this roster. But essentially, you know what it is. You've got your line combinations with a couple of extra forwards. You've got your 8 defensemen, and you just start opening night with the belief that you could compete for a playoff spot. But BK and Curbs and Brooke were talking about this on the opening drive today. And I remember, but again, I mentally block out what last season was because it was just not very pretty for the longest time. Here's what your opening night lineup looked like for the Blues last season. And you tell me if this team's better than last year. Booch, Thomas, and Kyrou. Okay.
I kind of like that line.
Saad, Shen, Kapanen.
Well,
it starts to go downhill from here. Verana, Hayes, and Blais. Remember when we thought Sammy Blais was going to be like a 20-goal scorer? We're like, this guy could do it.
Jakub Verana was going to be a 40-goal
Stop it. He earned a contract from the Capitals.
First off, I never believed in Sammy Blais being a 20-goal scorer. Vrana, I was a little higher on, but Blais never.
Your fourth line was Toropchenko, Oscar Sundqvist, and Jake Neighbors. I could stop there, and we can all pick out where the Blues are better than where they were last season. But let's go on. Your defense, Letty Parayko, same as this one, Krugen, Falk, Scandella, and Tucker. It's pretty obvious where this team has improved. You can pick apart certain areas. For me, and Grant brought this up as well, your bottom 4 on defense is 10 times better than what it was last season when it was Krug, Falk, Scandella, Tucker, and now you've got Broberg, Falk, Suter, and Kessel. Your bottom 6 has the potential to at least chip in offensively, and you have a lot of potential in your top 6. All of this is potential. We're playing a lot of what-ifs right now. It could look awful, but when you look at where the Blues were last season, 234 goals scored as a team. They allowed 248 goals as a roster. That's about 3 goals per game that they allowed last season. That's where this improvement starts. Your improvement starts with goal suppression. You are not going to be a team, I believe, that is going to be giving up 3 goals a night because of your defense, your bottom 6, and, of course, your goaltending.
Yeah, I could see definitely the step forward in goal suppression, especially now that, you mentioned that top 4. Now that you kind of replace Broberg with Torrey Krug, you're going to be a little bit better defensive-minded. And we'll see. Broberg looks like he could be a guy that could get up in the rush as well. Just a few clips that I've seen from the preseason and what we saw at training camp when we went out there. That guy looks like he's a gazelle on skates, really gliding around. So I can see how we've also gotten to the Bouwmeester comps, by the way.
Yep.
I agree, though, that you look at that top 9. Now, look, I don't necessarily like Buchnevich at center, but it definitely feels a lot better, and it feels a little faster than last year's team. You look at last year's team, that Hayes and Blais combination on the third line, that had to be one of the slowest moving third lines in hockey. And that's with Verana doing his circles around the ice while he wasn't doing anything to help out defensively. Like, that third line is much better going into this season. I think fourth line's probably a wash compared to what it was a year ago. But I think that third line is what is the biggest difference for me. The top two lines, I think you're going to see some pretty good offense out of them. That third line is the one that I can look at and go, okay, that's where you can at least envision where you see some of that depth of scoring going into this season. And that's the biggest thing that kind of separates them. I still think they're probably not a playoff team, but it's not because that I think the roster's worse than it was a year ago. I think the roster's better. I think the West is just better around them.
I think early on, and again, these things are going to change when Brandon Saad slides back into the lineup. But early on, my biggest question mark is that second line. Really, every player on it. What's Booch going to look like at center? We saw him play there last year. Was an experiment that was good at times, bad at other times. You have Jordan Kyrou, who, what's he going to look like this season? Is he going to be a player that improves defensively while putting up numbers that he's put up the last couple of years? Is he still going to be streaky, or is he going to have a little bit more of a consistent season? And then Alexander Texier, who is a pretty big wild card on this team, he looked great in the preseason. He looked phenomenal. His first time being out of a market that's not Columbus. He'll be in a little bit of a more competitive, environment. And listen, when Columbus was good back in 2019, when they were making their playoff runs, Alexander Texier was an effective player for them when they swept Tampa Bay and they were in that series against Boston the year they went to the final. Alexander Texier was a good player for them. If he can solidify himself as a top six forward, I think that allows a domino effect that's very positive for this team, and a lot of players can slide into their natural roles. Over the past couple of years, we've talked a lot about how Brandon Saad's playing a second-line role. He's a third-line player.
Totally.
Which is totally fine. That's not a knock against Brandon Saad, but he's best suited as a third-line player. If he's playing second line, you kind of see where this team has its faults. But if you have a player like Texier who can step up and really take that role on, and then you have players like Brandon Saad sliding into their normal roles, it's huge for the Blues.
I know people aren't going to believe me when I say this is a faster team than last season. To T-Bone's point of that third line with Hayes and Blais, I know a lot of people are still skeptical with Kapanen, but he's fast. And he and Joseph play fast. And I think that's crucial with what they're trying to use here. But more than anything, it's the ability to get the puck out of your zone on the defensive side. You've got a Broberg, you got a Leddy, a Falk, a Parayko. All four guys can smoothly skate the puck out of the zone and at least create that transition. And the part two is Ryan Suter with almost 1,500 games played in the NHL. That's smart hockey and know when to get the puck out of the area and move it forward with this. It's really going to come down to the offense. Somebody texted in on our Air Comfort Service text line saying, offensively, it's still a big question mark for me. You're right. I don't know if Holloway is a top six winger. I don't know if Texier is a top six winger. Can Kyrou find consistent offense playing with somebody other than Robert Thomas? What's Jake Neighbors? There are a lot of question marks with this offense this season. But I look at where they were last year, and I look at where they're at this year. There's more line chemistry with what they're trying to accomplish. And it's going to come down to, can you finish? Because you saw it in preseason, and I understand it's preseason. You create the offensive zone time. You are able to cycle the puck, which was something they were unable to do last season. But can you finish? And that's where it's going to come down to, what's Holloway? What's Texier? Can Jake Neighbors take that next step? Those are all questions we're not going to have until about 10 to 15 games into the season.
Yeah, and I mentioned, I do think their goal suppression is going to be better. I mean, you look at their six defensemen. I think you're better defensively. That third pair is way better. Suter and Kessel compared to Scandell and Tucker a year ago. Now, that being said, I still have major questions about their offense at 5-on-5. I mean, again, Alex BK thought I was overreacting when they basically said, hey, we're going to reshuffle our entire top nine because we're not generating offense in the preseason. To me, that was a little alarming, and I think it's very telling. Now, I do find it interesting that both of you brought up Kyrou as a question mark. I don't think Kyrou is a question mark for me. I know I can write down in pen right now, Kyrou's going to score 30 goals, and he's going to be somewhere between 65 and 75 points. He's not the biggest question mark on line number two.
Here's why he's a question mark for me. When's he scoring those goals? Because last year with Jordan Kyrou, I want to double-check this where he was. A bulk of those goals that he scored were at the second half of the season when you were out of it and you started to compete a little bit more. But remember, we were talking about Jordan Kyrou, real snake bitten in terms of he had the scoring chances and didn't capitalize on it. So I'm looking at this right now. Up until January 1st for Jordan Kyrou, he scored a total of 10 goals.
Yeah.
He had 10 goals in 37 games.
I understand what you're saying of, okay, well, most of those came kind of when they were out of, but they were really in it for a big chunk of that second half. I think that's just who Kyrou is. Kyrou's going to go through these stretches where it is, man, he's only got 10 goals and we're all the way into January.
Yeah, but I can't rely on him to score 25 goals in 41 games because that's what he did in the second half last season. He scored 12 in the first. I think you can rely on the fact that he's just going to get to 30-plus every year. Where their biggest problem was last year was, okay, so if Kyrou's not doing that, and I understand, I do get to an extent what you're saying of, hey, he's going to have to be more consistent. I just think he's like he's like Nolan Gorman, but he actually produces. Yeah.
And I think what you're looking at is, okay, there are going to be big stretches where he's not scoring. That's just going to happen. Do they have the guys, though, that can pick him up? And I think that was their biggest problem last year. They didn't have the guys to pick him up. They didn't generate offense at 5-on-5. It's why I'm skeptical about a Holloway, a Texier, Buchnevich at center. Can he be a guy that is a goal scorer when he's at the second-line center position? Like, those guys have to be able to pick up Kyrou for when he's going through those stretches. Now, that doesn't mean Texier and Holloway need to become 30 goal scorers this season. But can they get to 20? I think if we're having a conversation about why they're not generating offense, I'm sure a lot of people will point to Kyrou. I think what you're going to have to point to is, okay, Holloway, Texier, they didn't really reach what we were expecting. Joseph, kind of the same conversation. Captain quickly out of the lineup as well. Where you're going to see their offense improve isn't Kyrou becoming a 40-goal scorer. That will certainly help. It's going to be do the complementary pieces do their part and score 10 to 15 goals to help them out offensively.
I should have clarified because I'm getting a lot of pushback of Kyrou scoring in that push in March is what you want. Absolutely. But what I mean by is he scoring in the early portion of the season is sometimes it takes other guys a little bit longer to get their feet wet. And when your entire top 6 or top 9 are slow out of the gate, you're losing hockey games, and that's hard to make up that difference in the standings with 2 or 3 months to play. If you can get off to a hot start offensively and you go through a cold spell in December and January and then you pick it back up in the later portion of the season, that's when other guys can step up. Last year he was so snake bitten early on and nobody else was contributing offensively. To your point, you were looking around saying who's got offense for us. Yeah. And that does come down to your secondary scoring.
The real answer to that was we just don't have the guys. You know, Vrana wasn't the answer that we thought. He was not the 40-goal scorer we expected. Well,
yeah, look at how many in your top 9 aren't here anymore.
Hayes gone.
Vrana, Blais. Kapanen probably isn't going to be in that spot when Saad comes back. And Schen's moved down into your third line. You've got 3 guys right now playing in your top 6 that weren't last season.
Exactly. And that's where it comes to me. Like, you guys had mentioned Kyrou. Like, if I told you right now, and you can draw up how he gets here at any point. I don't care if it is he gets hot early and struggles down the stretch, or if it's the opposite. He basically does what he did a year ago. If I told you right now, I'm going to bump the numbers just a little bit here. Let's say he gets 31 goals and he ends up with 40 assists. So he ends up with 71 points this season, and he's a we'll say minus 10, basically where he was a year ago defensively. Would you sign up for that, or would you want more? Because I would just sign up for that again. Like, if he doesn't improve defensively from where he did a year ago, and he's scoring 30-plus goals, to me, he did his job.
I hear you. I guess it comes down to what those other guys are doing, because I'll go back to Armstrong's comment. We go as far as our best players take us. And if Thomas is a potential 100-point player, I think Kyrou's going to have to be 80 or more points for this team to get to that next level, unless you're getting 20 to 25 goals from a Holloway, 15 to 20 goals from a Texier, and then you're getting that contributions.
I guess my question then would be, to your point on the 80 points from Kyrou, should that be what I should be expecting from him if he's not playing with the best center on the team? Like, right now
there's your problem.
Right now he's playing with, I guess, our second best center in Pavel Buchnevich. I mean, I'd argue it's Braden Shen, but he's on the third line.
And that's why Jordan Kyrou is a question mark for me. It's not so much Jordan Kyrou, it's the conditions around him. What is Jordan Kyrou going to be able to do with Pavel Buchnevich at center distributing the puck? Like, that could either be a really good thing, it could also be a really bad thing. Like, if it's not working out for Pavel Buchnevich at center, before they make that change, it's not going to look good for Jordan Kyrou either, probably. And then Alexander Texier, if he's, he was shooting the puck a lot in the preseason. If he's more of a shooter,
with like 13 or 14 shots on goal.
He led the team at the end once it was all said and done in the preseason in shots on goal. If he's more of a shooter and is not, as much of a distributor, I mean, when Jordan Kyrou was scoring a lot of his goals, he was playing with Robert Thomas, who is mainly a distributor. So if Buch is struggling and Texier isn't really a distributor, then what's that going to look like for Kyrou? I don't think it's more of, what is Jordan Kyrou? I think what is Jordan Kyrou going to be surrounded by what he's going to be surrounded by.
We'll get more into that Robert Thomas and that top line conversation coming up in the 12 o'clock hour. We'll also get to your questions. If you've got any on the Blues, NFL, college football, you can send them our way. We'll get to the questions and answer segment in about 15 minutes or so. 314-399-9646. Also over on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. But coming up next, one more game to go with Week 5 action. Tonight, you've got the Chiefs and Saints. We'll do a little NFL quick hitters next here on 101 ESPN.
Great Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. It was a tough week in college football this week and a ton of upsets, one of them being the Missouri Tigers, who lost 41-10 at Texas A&M as they fall to number 21 in the standings, in the rankings rather. Illinois, who was idle, is now at 23 in the rankings, so a tough week all around in college football. Tonight here on 101 ESPN, we'll have some NFL action, some Monday Night Football for you. It'll be Saints and Chiefs. Pregame for that one starting at 6:30. And then tomorrow, the Blues season will get underway as they're in Seattle to take on the Kraken. And it'll be an early one. Pregame will start tomorrow at 2:30. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Along with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We've got questions and answers coming up in our next segment. You can text us 314-399-9646 on the Air Comfort Service text line. Also our YouTube channel over at 101 ESPN STL. Shout out to the Graveyard, who is live and active right now. Let's start with NFL quick hitters with a little bit of news. Now, nothing really official with this, but both Diana Rossini and Adam Schefter are reporting that Davante Adams is expected to be traded within the next 48 hours, and both have reported that the Raiders want this to get done as soon as possible to seemingly get him out of Vegas so that they don't have to deal with that soap opera anymore. Now the question is what we talked last week, T-Bone. Who's going to be the winner of those sweepstakes? Because we've heard Pittsburgh, we've heard Kansas City kind of got shot down pretty quick.
Yeah.
We've heard, what are some of the other teams that we've heard in this one? Because we talked about it last week. Saints.
We've heard Jets.
Jets, okay. So those are the three big. It started with the Saints and Jets, and then Pittsburgh was in there to where they apparently made a aggressive case for it. After watching another week of this offense, which seemingly opened up a little bit more in the NFL, what team is most desperate for Davante Adams?
Oh, well, spell it with me. Jets, Jets.
Aaron Rodgers needs his best friend back.
He does. He looks miserable, and I can't blame him because they look broken.
How do you think that makes him feel, though, that Davante Adams' best friend is Derek Carr? That's a love triangle that you don't want to be a part of.
It is an awkward relationship, but I think Rodgers will make it happen. Adam Schefter also reported about 10 minutes ago on the Pat McAfee show. He said he still thinks Davante Adams wants to play for the Jets or Saints, and he thinks in the end the Raiders will find a way to get a deal done with one of those two teams. I think it's the Jets. I can totally. I mean, let's just be honest. Who's the GM of the Jets? It's not whoever the actual guy is. It's Aaron Rodgers. Who's the head coach of the Jets? It's not Robert Saleh. It's Aaron Rodgers or Nathaniel Hackett, since he calls the plays. But I think you're going to see him end up being a Jet. I mean, they just lost. They're 2-3. Rodgers is getting banged up. I can totally see where they panic here and they overpay and they bring in Davante Adams and they try and make this work. They do everything they can to make Aaron Rodgers happy, and it leads to a 10-7 season. They're bouncing the first round of the playoffs.
You have to do this if you're the Jets, because your season, if you're Robert Saleh, your job is on the line moving forward. You're now 2-3. You just lost 23-17 against, which, not to toot my own horn here, but toot the Minnesota Vikings that literally played a terrible game offensively.
Lost their quarterback.
Yeah, Sam Darnold had 4 or 6 points, I think, fantasy football purposes. But you're 2-3. Here's your upcoming schedule: Bills, Steelers, Patriots, Texans. I look at those 3 games and watching this Jets team play. You're 5-4 after the next 4 games, maybe. You need Davante Adams to keep your season alive.
Yeah, I think right now, I mean, if they don't add any weapons, I think there's a legitimate argument to say, I know people are down on the Bills. I heard ridiculous. Oh, was McDermott on the hot seat? No, that would be stupid. They could lose to the Bills at home right now. They could easily lose to the Steelers. I mean, though the Steelers are one of the worst things to happen for football right now, watching their offense.
It's not fun.
They're great defensively. They could easily slow down the 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers. And then you got the Texans who could beat them. So, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. They're looking at 3-6 to start the season. So, yeah, they're probably the team that's the most desperate to bring in Davante Adams and just pay whatever it is that they need to do, a second-round pick and attach whatever else needs to be to get that deal done.
Well, we'll keep you posted of that one if any news comes from that. But let's stay in the AFC. One of the most entertaining games for me yesterday, T-Bone, was the Ravens in overtime beating the Cincinnati Bengals. And now if you're a Bengals team, you have just lost what's that now? You're sitting at
1-4.
1-4. Your offense was superb in that game. Now, you made a couple of bad decisions that costed you, but look, Lamar Jackson just went off in that game. But you just had Jamar Chase with 193 receiving yards. You just had Joe Burrow throw for 392 passing yards. Offensively, it looks like you're right back on track. Defensively now is the question mark with the Cincinnati Bengals team. I walked away from that one not feeling better about either of those teams because Baltimore still has a defensive issue. Cincinnati obviously has a defensive issue. Both offenses look good, but I don't walk out of that saying, oh, yeah, those two teams could compete in the AFC.
I think that's fair. Granted, I don't know. The AFC feels more open than in years past.
Yeah, now that I said it, it's like I don't know who can compete in the AFC because everybody's open.
I do think you're probably right. They probably belong in like that second tier. Both those teams do. I actually left that game feeling pretty good about Cincinnati. The offense actually looked like an offense this week. And you look at their upcoming schedule, they're at the Giants next week, sadly in prime time. They're at the Cleveland Browns following that, then home against the Eagles, and then home against the Raiders, at Baltimore, at Los Angeles. Just looking at the first 4 games that I mentioned there, they can win 3 of those 4.
Yeah.
You win 3 of those 4, you're looking at 4-5, and now you're right back in the conversation to at least be considered as a playoff team. Look, I know everybody's going to go, they're 1-4, they're going to overreact. They should have won that game yesterday. They had a chance to kick a field goal and they missed it. I'm not all that worried still. Now, is it ideal to start 1-4? No. But because the offense looked like it was back on track yesterday with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, I'm actually not that concerned. I think they're going to turn that thing around in Cincinnati. And now that Zach Moss is hurt, they actually get to play their best running back in Chase Brown.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to ultimately end up being fine. I left that game feeling better about Cincinnati. I didn't really have a big takeaway on Baltimore, though it does look a little bit better now that the offense is clicking. Cincinnati's a team that I think people are overreacting to, saying they're 1-4, you should write them off. To me, they're not done.
No, they've done this before, too, where they start off slow and then they find a way to push down the stretch. It's really going to come down to, can you get both sides of the football working at the same time? Because that has not clicked yet through 5 games this season. Let's go to a team that probably does deserve a lot of our concern, and that's the San Francisco 49ers. Another team that, not 1-4, but you're 2-3 for a team that everybody was expecting to be back in the Super Bowl. They sure might be still because, of course, they're dealing with the injury to Christian McCaffrey. I don't know what's up with this team, though, T-Bone. McCaffrey takes an element out of this, but Brock Purdy doesn't look as good as he's done in the past. Offensively, that was probably their best game. You saw Brandon Ayuk go for 147 yards. I don't think Deebo Samuel was really involved.
I can confirm as a fantasy
Yeah, I
holder
think a lot of people can. But once again, you look at a San Francisco 49ers team and you just kind of tilt your head and say, what's wrong, buddy?
I don't know what's wrong.
Because they are not the best team in the NFC right now.
Yeah.
I don't know who is, but they're not it.
Yeah. I can't explain what's going wrong with the San Francisco 49ers because 2 of their last 3 losses, that Minnesota game, Minnesota played very well. And so that one, I thought San Fran didn't play all that bad. I mean, Purdy threw for over 300 yards. The game against the Rams was all kinds of weird clock management. It allowed the Rams to get back in it, and they come back and win that football game. And then against Arizona yesterday, I mean, I truly just gave up on that game. They led 23-10 at the half, and they were dominating. The defense was all over Kyler Murray. I was like, okay, this one's in the bag. Don't have to pay attention to this football game anymore. And then the next thing I know, I look up and they're allowing the game-winning field goal to go in, and they lose that game 24-23. There's just weird vibes going on with the San Francisco 49ers. I don't think Brock Purdy's played particularly well. Maybe it is because Christian McCaffrey is out.
I mean, it takes one of your decisions off the table, and then defenses can play Brock Purdy a lot more.
I mean, the only thing it really
back.
takes off the table is kind of him in the passing game. But how much of that is really to point to and say, oh, because they can't throw the ball to Christian McCaffrey, it's why they're 2-3.
Yeah.
Because Jordan Mason's been pretty good as their running back. Remember, he had the star performance against the Jets on opening night. And he was solid again yesterday. I can't figure out what's wrong with San Francisco. It does feel weird. I think Kyle Shanahan's arguably is top 3 coach in the NFL. I think they're going to get it figured out. But it is a little weird. I saw today that they're like one of the worst teams with a 10-point lead going into the 4th quarter since Shanahan took over, which is an odd stat to have since I just said he's a top 3 coach in the NFL. I think they're going to be fine, but they do need Brock Purdy to play better. To me, he was the big reason they lost that game yesterday.
Again, it just feels like there's a lot of teams right now when you look around the NFL. And again, I know we're 5 weeks in, but now's when you really start to see who the real teams are. it just feels like there's a lot of teams that I'm looking at saying something's wrong with them, but I expect them to flip the switch and be okay.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, Baltimore, San Francisco. You've got about 5 teams. Kansas City, who I know is dealing with injuries, but you got about 5 teams that you look at and you say, I know they're better than this. I expect them to flip the switch, but the problem is it going to be too little too late?
When would you officially panic? Now I know each team's different. Like you look at San Fran's upcoming schedule at Seattle versus the Chiefs versus the Cowboys, at the Bucks versus Seattle.
Whew. I mean, so you said Seahawks. Who was after the Seahawks? The first
Chiefs.
time? Seahawks, Chiefs, Bucks, and then Seattle.
And Cowboys in there as well.
And the Cowboys in there. It sounds odd to say, but if I'm San Francisco, I think I probably panic after that first Seattle game if I lose. Because now you're 2-4. Seattle is better than you in the NFC West, standings-wise. Now, you can make up ground, but I think I'd have to start panicking a little bit, saying, now, again, you're waiting for Christian McCaffrey to come back, but at some point you got to look at this and say, what's going on here?
I think I would begin to worry if they drop at Seattle and versus the Chiefs. I mean, now you're looking at, what would that be, 2-5?
Yeah.
Then it's about time you panic because you're right. Now you're suddenly looking up at the Seattle Seahawks, and that's a Thursday night game. That's why I kind of look at that one a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But then, their schedule is brutal for a decent stretch here. I mean, going beyond the second Seahawks team, at the Packers, at the Bills, versus the Bears, who offensively aren't great, but they're feisty and Caleb Williams is playing better. And then you get the Rams at home, which should be healthy by the time we get to early December.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the next 2 games, if you haven't really seen the 49ers start to click as an offense without Christian McCaffrey, then it should be about that time that you start to panic.
We'll get more into the NFL a little bit later on in the 1 o'clock hour with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Send us your questions, 314-399-9646. We'll answer them next here on 101 ESPN.
Time for your heating system check. Contact Air Comfort Service at aircomfortservice.com. That's aircomfortservice.com.
Alex Ferrario with you, excited to talk about Ted Drews once again. Look, I know it's the fall. It's starting to get a little bit chillier outside. Doesn't matter. Always a great season to go get that Ted Drews. And look, now that we're in the Halloween season, if you're like me and my family, Halloween's just going 24/7 in our house, then take a trip with the family. Go to Ted Drews off of Chippewa and get the Great Pumpkin. It's a seasonal blend slice of pumpkin pie. It's mixed with Ted's delicious vanilla custard, and it's topped with your whipped cream. And that's off of Chippewa, that famous location where 95 years and 4 generations of families have been serving St. Louisans that famous frozen custard. You hear me talk about it all the time. My family and I, we make it a tradition like it was a tradition when I was a kid. Go out there on a Friday, sit in the back of our van, have some Ted Drews, and just enjoy the nice weather and time with your family. So make it an appointment time with your family. Plus, while you're out there, walk across the parking lot, check out the Ted Drews gift shop, where you can shop a variety of unique apparel, souvenirs, gift cards, so much more. By the way, holiday season is around. Gift cards, perfect gift to put someone in that stocking stuffer once you get to that point. Check them out. Ted Drews, famous frozen custard. It really is good, guys and gals.
AMCO presents Bet You Didn't Know.
Bet you didn't know that your car's transmission is made up of 800 pieces. Also, bet you didn't know that AMCO's fixed over 40 million transmissions, and that AMCO offers a nationwide warranty.
AMCO offers easy payment plan options for most any credit situation, so you can fix it fast and pay it off slow at AMCO.
That's AMCO, AA, MCO.
Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends at Rhino Shield. Plenty of businesses around the area have used Rhino Shield's product. Rhymes Heating and Cooling in South County, St. Luke's Lutheran Church in Campbell Hill, Illinois, the Gravois Village Shopping Center in High Ridge. That's my neck of the woods. All of these businesses called Darren at Rhino Shield. Why? Because the exterior of their business needed a facelift, whether it was water damage, whether it was paint chipping off. The look didn't match the product, and that's why they called Rhino Shield, because they wanted the facelift. Rhino Shield uses a ceramic coating. It's not paint, which means you're going to get the proper product that when you use Rhino Shield's work, you never have to worry about it again. It's a 2 to 3 coat process. It's 100% waterproof. It deflects 90% of the UV rays. You set it and forget it, and you get a 25-year transferable warranty. Have Darren come out from Rhino Shield, give you a free estimate, 877-25-RHINO, 877-25rhino.com.
Hi, it's Randy Carricker with Jim Olive, the Auto Loan Pro from AutoLoanPro.com. And Jim, you have that AutoLoanPro.com playbook. And I know a lot of people don't understand their finances, but that'll help them.
Randy, if you go to the AutoLoanPro.com today and download the free playbook, you'll have an opportunity to kind of understand the entire car buying process and what it does, not only today, but for your future. It'll help you understand what it takes to get in a nice, reliable new vehicle of your choice and get driving today.
Download the playbook from AutoLoanPro.com today.
See the area's largest display of master spas, hot tubs, and Michael Phelps swim spas, all made in the USA. Over 30 on display. Call 314-843-7727. They put the in spa.
The 101 Reward Center is always loaded up with awesome giveaways. And right now, we have your chance to win a Yeti Tundra portable wheeled cooler.
So who wants a drink?
Get entered to win that sweet Yeti cooler right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app.
You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers.
Presented by Window World St. Louis.com. Simply the best for less.
All right, so we're going to do a little different questions and answers here on BK and Ferrario.
Dude, you are winded. What the hell's going on over there?
I'm just going to read you guys a text mess or a email that we just got sent to
the company.
The company. Thank you. I really am winded.
Jack you need me to read this? You seem tired.
Jack Buck said never run to a microphone, and I just sprinted down and then back.
Yeah.
Read that for me.
Okay. All right, email to the whole company. If you are parked in the garage and own the license plate bleep, 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 bleep in a Honda with a Mickey Mouse sticker on the back window, your car is not in park and is slowly moving. Thanks, company secretary.
Didn't see that email at all, obviously.
I didn't either, to be honest.
See, I did.
Did you?
And I'm parked close to that car.
We're in commercial break, and Mike Ryder walks in, and he goes, dude, get to your car. It's not in park, and it's rolling. I'm like, okay, bleep off, Ryder. I'm not going to run to the garage.
My initial reaction was, this joke makes no sense.
He said it again. Your car is not in park, and it is rolling in the garage. I go, Mike, not funny. I'm not joking. I just bolted down into our parking garage during that commercial break, which is why I'm winded right now. Lo and behold, it was not in park. It was literally in the middle of the parking garage. There were 3 Creve Coeur police officers out there and a couple of others from the building. So thank you for all of you that are listening right now. They had put 2 2x4s behind my wheel to stop it from going. And look, everybody has those moments when you forget something. Apparently, I pulled into the garage this morning at 8:45, did not put it in park, got out of the car, and for the last 2 hours, 3 hours and 15 minutes, it's been slowly rolling backwards. I'm amazed I haven't hit anybody or anything.
I am too, to be quite honest. Was it like in the mid? Like it wasn't in a parking spot at all? It was in the middle.
Honestly, I should have taken a picture of it, but I was panicking.
I did take a picture of it.
Did you?
So listen to this. So this morning I got in, and this car, it was like, I'd say 10% in a parking spot. And I was like, look at this idiot. Like, I didn't know whose car it was. And so I parked I parked semi close to the car, not like really close, but on the other side of the road. And when we got that email, I was about to go to Ryder and be like, hey, can you watch the board real quick? I'm going to go move my car because it's kind of close to this car. But Ryder came in here. So,
yeah. Well,
I do have a picture of it because I sent it to my friends that said, look at this idiot.
That's actually incredible. Send that to me and I'll put it out for people to see. A couple of people are texting it. Oh, my God. What time was that at?
This was at 9:31.
So it probably went maybe a couple more feet over the next 2 hours.
Show YouTube right now?
Yeah, show it to YouTube right now.
YouTube.
Head over to YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. What a terrible human being. I got a ton of texts coming in right now. The bigger problem is the Mickey Mouse sticker. It's my wife's car. We rotate because she's got the van because she's got the three girls, and it's she ran a marathon. It's Mickey Mouse. And then the other one is, how did you not take the key out of the car? So it doesn't have the key. It's the button.
Yeah.
And so what happened, I was on the phone. I was dealing with a couple of medical bills that we're questioning right now. I'm on the phone. I get into the parking lot. And my van is the push button. So you put the car in brake with the push. Katie's is the lever. And so I think I just assumed I parked when I pressed the button and I turned the car off and it was in drive.
Which I'm actually shocked that A, it would let that happen.
It didn't beep.
And B, like in my old car, which had a key, I'd done that once or twice before where, you maybe at the time I didn't have a backup camera, where you put it in reverse and not put it in park, and it would go crazy when I would turn the car off.
Yeah, well, the police officer was like, I ran the plate numbers and I was wondering who this idiot was, and then I saw it was you and I knew you were on the air. So props to the Creve Coeur police because they saved my bacon on that one. But
that's fantastic.
PSA, ladies and gentlemen, turn the car off before you get out of it and put it in park. Yep, Grant's got it up on YouTube. All right, I stole up a questions and answers here real quick. 2 questions. Number 1, guys, any concern over any Major League Baseball managers losing their job between now and the end of the playoffs? T-Bone, I'll let you go so I can catch my breath.
I think there's a chance if Dave Roberts could be fired. If the Dodgers end up losing to the Padres, and I don't know how they're going to get through the series. Freeman's hurt and their pitching stinks. I can see where Dave Roberts' job is on the line. Same with Aaron Boone. If the Yankees don't get to the AL, in fact, win the AL, I think there's an argument for his job to potentially be on the line, and I'll throw Philly in there as well. I think you could hear some buzz. I don't think he'll be fired about Thompson being potentially let go.
Yeah, I think Dave Roberts is probably the biggest one right now. You assume Detroit loses that series, they're not going to fire their manager. It's a miracle that they got into the playoffs. Aaron Boone might if you lose to the Royals, but it sure seems like they've stuck to him pretty hardcore. Nobody from the Mets maybe the Phillies.
Yeah, I think his chances are slim, but Mets, no.
Yeah, but man, if you lose in the NLDS when you're supposed to have World Series aspirations, it's not easy to sit there and convince yourself that guy should be back. So yeah, it's be some interesting names potentially if this NLDS doesn't go. If you get to the NLCS and lose, I don't think anybody's going to get fired in that position. It's the NLDS or any of those wild card teams. All right, one more, guys. 2-part question: are Drew Bannister and Jordan Kyrou with the organization going into next season? And is Jim Montgomery the team's next head coach?
Second part, I'll say...
So he's a free agent after this year.
Montgomery.
Because this past offseason, they were talking about him getting out of his contract. He's got 1 more year left on his contract.
I'll say no for now. Montgomery being the next head coach. I think it's just it's such a recycling of head coaches that who knows who it could be. I don't think there's a question for me if Bannister or Kyrou will be here next year. I don't think you fire Bannister after year 1. I think you give him at minimum the second year to see how it looks. And I think Kyrou's locked here. Again, we'll talk about this a little later on. If the Blues are struggling offensively, to me, it's probably not a Kyrou issue. It's more about the surrounding cast.
Yeah, I don't. The only way Montgomery is hired is if Bannister is fired. And I mean, this season, I don't want to say it couldn't happen because Davis Payne got fired 13 games into his second season. If the right coach comes along and you deem that's the guy that's supposed to win for you, I could see somebody firing their coach. It's got to be a bad season. Like, I'm talking top 5 first-round draft pick bad to see Bannister get fired 1 year into his 2-year contract situation. And with Bannister and Kyrou, I would say the odds of Bannister being here next season are better than Kyrou's because they've said that Kyrou's here. They like Kyrou, but if you can't make it work with Robert Thomas, I would imagine the Blues are going to be like, okay, well, what's your role then moving forward? So, again, who knows with that? I don't expect any of these things to happen, but it sure is a interesting season for a lot of the NHL veterans because I go back to the Armstrong comments before training camp. We've given this team the players, the roster that can compete, and if they don't, then we'll either be making changes for the good or for the worse at the trade deadline. Kind of tells you that if you're not winning, you're going to look at the veterans as to why you're not winning and make changes from there. With Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm the guy that doesn't put his car in park. We'll take a break here on BK and Ferrario. When we come back, Mizzou, can they still make the college football playoffs if they have 2 losses? We'll discuss that and the weekend in the college football playoff bracket. Just was really weird over the weekend next on 101 ESPN.
Le'Veon Moss, and A&M just keeps rolling. Look at big Le'Veon Moss. He's going to house it to open up the second half. The Aggies can do no wrong today.
That was the Missouri Tigers losing to Texas A&M over the weekend, 41-10, to hand Mizzou their first loss of the season. And I'm sure a lot of you listening are like me. I thought their first loss was going to be at Alabama. I thought this team was going to find a way to win against Texas A&M. It was a test for them, but I thought on paper they were the better team. And we were talking about a 7-0 team going up against Alabama in terms of supremacy in the SEC. And that is not the case anymore. And after that loss, a lot of people are now down the rabbit hole of this team's not even going to make the college football playoffs. Because you have this loss, you're more than likely going to lose to Alabama when you play them in 3 weeks. And now you're talking about having to remain perfect against UMass, Auburn, number 18 Oklahoma, who won't be number 18 Oklahoma when you play them, South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. You're telling me that a team that nearly lost to Vanderbilt, that just lost to Texas A&M, has to find a way to remain perfect with the exception of Alabama to get into the college football playoffs? Seems outlandish to me. But let's go down that path. Because one thing's for certain over the weekend, as much as Mizzou didn't even stumble. I mean, they tripped and just face planted on the concrete. So did a lot of other teams in college football. You had Alabama losing to Vanderbilt. You had Michigan losing again. And you had Tennessee losing. That's probably the perfect scenario for the Missouri Tigers if you want to even talk about college football playoffs, that there are other teams that potentially are going to be talking about 2 losses at the end of their season. I mean, Alabama already they got the victory over Georgia, but you take that one, you had the loss to Kentucky, and now they beat Kentucky, correct? Why am I blanking on this? Alabama. No, Georgia was the one that played Kentucky.
Yeah,
I am all over the place right now. If you're Mizzou, 2 losses gives you a chance, but it is not a pretty chance if you lose to Alabama and you still have that loss to Texas A&M.
Yeah, I can't help but look at them and wonder if they just use their mulligan and they need to win out the rest of the way. You know, I think there's a chance that there will be 2 lost teams that couldn't get in. I mean, I went back and looked at last year's top 25 AP poll before the playoffs started because it gives us a good idea. And remember, you're looking at the top 11 because that 12th team is a group of 5 teams. So if that's the case, you were looking at really 4 teams that had 2 losses. Mizzou, who we mentioned, had 3 top 25 wins a year ago. You look at Oregon, they had 3 top 25 wins a year ago. Now, they did have one, which I think is going to end up looking like Mizzou's, to where Colorado ends up falling out of it. Wasn't very good. I think that's what you're going to look at with the Boston College scenario. But they did their 1 loss against a top 25 team, or 2 losses, were both to Washington, who were a playoff team a year ago. You look at Penn State, they only had 1 top 25 win a year ago. But their 2 losses in the top 25, Ohio State and Michigan, 2 teams that were ranked in the top 5 at the time. You look at Ole Miss in that scenario, they had 1 top 25 win in that last year. One of their 2 losses against the top 25 team was against Georgia. The other was to Alabama. So, 2, again, teams that were contenders for the playoff. You just lost to Texas A&M, who could end up being a team that contends for the playoff. That's probably the best case scenario for the Missouri Tigers, is that you look at Texas A&M and you end up going, okay, they were a team that ended up with 2 losses, but you hope you're not in the same conversation as them. Why? Because they got the head-to-head matchup with you. So they will be ahead of you. You almost need them to be playing for the college football playoff. That Alabama game, Alabama, sure, their 1 loss is to Vanderbilt, but if they take care of business and they beat you, now you're looking at your schedule and going, okay, where are we going to be able to build up our resume? Mm-hmm. And right now it's the Oklahoma game. But to your point,
that's not even going to be a top 25 team by the time you play them.
There's a pretty good chance they're not in the top 25 because they're playing Texas this weekend. And if they end up losing to Texas, depending on how close it is, they're 18th right now. There's a decent chance that they end up falling out of the top 25. So you're looking at Mizzou right now and you're saying, okay, right now we might have 1 more top 25 team on our schedule. And that alone can be a good thing. That means, hey, our schedule's pretty easy. That also can be a bad thing because it's hard to build your resume for the college football playoff committee if you're not going to have a lot of top 25 opportunities to build upon.
Let me ask you guys this. Sorry, Grant, to cut you off. How many SEC teams do you think get into the college football playoffs? I think we've talked about this in the past, but in case we didn't. 5?
Let's see. Texas got a shot. Georgia's going to have a shot. Bama, Tennessee, Ole Miss. I think 5's reasonable, bare minimum 4.
So let's go down the path that 5 get in. I think it's pretty obvious. Texas, Georgia, unless Missouri beats Alabama, those are pretty much surefire shots at getting in. And now you're talking about Tennessee and Ole Miss. Here's the issue for the Missouri Tigers. If you don't win out, say you get to 2 losses, LSU is sitting at 13th right now. They're 4-1, and here's their remaining schedule. Ole Miss, tough matchup. Arkansas, Texas A&M, Alabama, Florida, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma. Got a couple of tough ones in there, but honestly, watching Alabama over the weekend, I could see LSU at least making it competitive with them. So you go beyond LSU, and you keep scrolling through with the SEC. You get to Oklahoma. We all think they're going to kind of fall out of this one. Texas A&M is in front of you. So to T-Bone's point, best case scenario is Texas A&M competes for one of those playoff spots. And if we believe only 5 SEC teams are going to get in, Texas A&M has to be better than one of Alabama or Ole Miss to make things even interesting for you. To me, this is going to come down to that Alabama game. If you want to keep your chances high of getting into the college football playoffs, if you're Mizzou, you got to beat Alabama.
Yeah. I mean, looking
and win out, I guess.
Yeah. Looking at where things stand right now, and this is where it does benefit Mizzou a little bit, is you do have these teams with these blemishes on their resume.
Right.
Like Alabama's loss is at Vanderbilt. Though Vanderbilt looks like a team that is feisty, that's not a great loss on your resume. Same with losing at Arkansas. Not one that you want on your resume. If you're Ole Miss, you don't want the loss at home versus Kentucky on your resume. So then comes down to, they're going to play Georgia. Ole Miss is. Tennessee's going to play Georgia and Alabama still. They probably need to win one of those to have a decent resume. And again, they could potentially have a top 10 win if they win one of those games. If you're Alabama, maybe if they have 2 losses, but their losses to a top 10 team in Tennessee on the road, the committee's going to look at them a lot better. Because of this schedule, I mean, looking at Alabama's schedule, they've got, just quick math here, 5 top 25 teams. I'll round it down to potentially 3, depending on what Oklahoma and what Missouri are. It's going to be hard to build the resume up when you don't have this strong of an SEC schedule. So I think the best case scenario for Mizzou, I do think they can still make the playoff with 2 losses. I think it's a little bit unlikely because they have one of the easiest schedules in the SEC. I think what you need here is you either need to win out, which is tough because you're at Alabama, or when you play that game at Alabama, it is super close.
Yeah.
You end up losing that game by like a last-second field goal, or you end up losing by a touchdown. Otherwise, I think the committee's going to look at you and go, there's a lot of better teams that have better resumes.
Totally.
And we've already got like 4 teams in the SEC. Do we slot in Missouri as the number 11 team? I don't know. It's going to be fascinating. It was one of my concerns with Missouri coming into the season was just, though in theory, having this easy of a schedule on the SEC is kind of a blessing, I also looked at it as, I've seen where this hurts teams in the past where they look at your strength of schedule and go, I don't know if that's a playoff team because they didn't really play anybody in the games that they did play that really mattered. They lost.
Part of me is not as worried, though, because you're still at the same level as every team in the SEC standings-wise except for Texas. Like, Texas is the only team, and they haven't played anybody except for Michigan, who's worthless this year.
Like, they really are worthless.
They're terrible.
Good luck on that win, T-Bone.
So, I mean,
Thanks,
while, yes, like it doesn't look good right now after this weekend, standings-wise, there's still 1 loss. They're with everybody else except for Texas right now in the SEC. And, like, I look at Alabama's schedule. I don't consider them a lock for the playoffs right now. Like, especially after that loss at Vanderbilt, like, you've still got a tough schedule ahead if you're Alabama. You go to LSU. You have Tennessee. You have Auburn at the end of the year. And while Auburn's not a great team, that rivalry is always, it could go either way. Like, Auburn can beat Alabama any given year. That's just how it goes. So I don't see Alabama as a lock, really. And if Alabama's not going to be a lock, you can't have Georgia as a lock because they just beat Georgia. So the only lock I have at this point is Texas. And if that's the case, then the SEC is still wide open, depending on who beats who.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think real quick here, from the 3-1-4, from the 3-1-4, guys, they didn't only just lose this game, they got embarrassed in this game. And that will weigh on the committee.
Totally. Style points are so important.
And especially, like, I say that you should root for A&M, that you probably want to root for them to end up being a team that finishes in the top 25. Your hope is they end up being a back half top 25 team, because right now the committee, if you were even with them record-wise, so let's say both Mizzou and Texas A&M finish with 2 losses. Let's say Texas A&M wins out, but they lose to Texas. So now the committee's going to look at it and go, okay, they lost to 2 top 25 teams, A&M did. Notre Dame at home, which was a close game, and they lost to Texas, who I think is arguably the best team in the country. To me, odds are they're going to be number 1. And then you look at Mizzou and you say, okay, there are 2 losses, Bama and to Texas A&M. Well, right there, boom, it's head-to-head. Texas A&M just blew Missouri out the door.
Yep.
They would look at them in favor. So the hope for the Missouri Tigers, if you're a Mizzou fan, should be A&M remains competitive, ends up probably losing 3 games this season, and then you find a way to be competitive with Alabama or beat Alabama, you beat Oklahoma, and you look at it and go, okay, now the committee can look at us and say, not only did they get killed in that game, but they were able to bounce back and play well down the stretch. But I'm skeptical of that from Mizzou.
See, T-Bone, you were complaining about the 12-team playoff format. Look, we're having these conversations.
They should be eliminated. Let's be honest. Mizzou should be eliminated today.
We'd be talking bowl games right now.
Well,
but
we wouldn't be.
12-game playoff, T-Bone. With Tanner Hendrickson
They shouldn't be in it.
and
You're
Greg
right.
Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next is the final step for the Blues exiting this retool, finding a partner for Robert Thomas. We'll discuss next on 101 ESPN.
Playing to that caliber, our team's not playing to that caliber. You know, very rarely those are going to the top 10 teams, win most of those awards. So that's what I said. It's our job and my job to get our team functioning. So when he's having years like this, you can be looked at for those major awards. I think he has all the attributes, and I think he's doing that job. But I think if you look at the history of the voting, those go to upper echelon teams, and we're not there yet. But that's what gets me up every morning, is to try and compliment guys like Robert so they can win those major awards. And to do that, I got to do my job and make sure we have good players around them. And that was the exciting part of this World Junior, is that to get these guys here when Robert's still in his prime, I think is going to be exciting for him and for us.
So that was Blues President of Hockey Operations Doug Armstrong back in January when he was with us on BK and Ferrario, when we were talking about the sensational season that Robert Thomas was having. And I truly believed he should have been in the Selke Trophy conversation. He had some of the most competitive minutes against the other team's lines. He finished as a positive in the plus-minus. Even strength-wise, he was up there among the best centermen in the National Hockey League, and he finished the season better than a point-per-game player. And he didn't have a whole lot of penalties. I think he finished with 48 total penalty minutes last season. I think we're all on the same page with Robert Thomas that this is one of the most underrated centermen in the National Hockey League. And after watching the juggling of the top line, not just in the preseason, but last season, where we saw everybody from Brandon Saad to Braden Shen to Jakub Vrana to Kapanen to Kyrou to Thomas to Booch to Neighbors. You saw everybody play up there with them. And I asked the question a lot last season, does this team have a top line? National analysts were like, yeah, you absolutely do. Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, that's it. Well, the coaching staff doesn't believe so because Kyrou's not playing with Robert Thomas. At least it seems to open up the season. For me, exiting out of this retool, you accomplished a couple of things. You've added more youth. You've brought in a defenseman that potentially is a top pair defenseman in the future. And you've got a number one center. The next step for this team to exit out of their retool is to find the Robin to your Batman of Robert Thomas and a top-line winger. Could be Jake Neighbors for some people. Could be Pavel Buchnevich for some people. Maybe it's Jimmy Snuggerud. That's an unknown commodity right now. I went back and looked at the top 12 offenses last season as a team. And then I went back and I looked at the centerman and his winger. Here are the centermen that I'm just going to list you guys the top 10. McKinnon, Matthews, Rope Hintz, Connor McDavid, Pedersen, Zibanejad, Aho, Larkin, O'Reilly. There's your top 10 of centermen.
All right, Thomas belongs in that category.
Would say Robert Thomas, if I'm going to go through those players, Robert Thomas is 7th or 8th on that list.
Yeah.
Here are the wingers that played with those centermen primarily, and here are the goals that they put up. Mikko Rantanen, 42. William Nylander, 40. Jason Robertson. He was hurt last year. He had 29 goals. The year prior, he scored 46. But Robertson did finish with 80 points that season. And that's a weird line because Rope Hintz only had 65 points, but he's like one of the best defensive centermen. That's a weird line. Zach Hyman, we all know, 54 goals. Brock Besser, 40 goals. Artemi Panarin, 49 goals. Andrei Svechnikov, another weird one, only had 19 goals but was hurt for half of the season, but did finish with 52 points in 59 games played. Point per game player. Lucas Raymond of the Detroit Red Wings finished with 31 goals, had 72 points, and then Philip Forsberg finished with 48 goals and 94 points. Do you see the common theme of what these top lines have? They've got a guy who scores 40 goals. That, to me, is the missing piece for this Blues team if they want to exit out of this retool. You figured out the young defense. Your top 4 defensively in the future looks pretty good. A Lindstein, a Broberg, an Adam Juracek, potentially a Colton Parayko or somebody else. Your depth looks good with all of these first-round draft picks that you have. You don't have a 40-goal scorer on this roster. Is it Neighbors? Potentially. Is it Snuggerud? Scout analysts just don't believe so. Who is it? Until this team finds a 40-goal scorer consistently to play with Robert Thomas, this team is going to be searching for that guy. I kind of comp it to what the Chicago Blackhawks did before they made that cup run. Now, they had Patrick Kane, who was the 40-goal scorer, but they were looking for that missing piece. And that missing piece with Marian Hossa, and they went on to win, 3 Stanley Cups in that time frame? The Blues need to find their top-line winger to play with Robert Thomas to exit out of this retool and enter the competitive window.
Yeah, I think it's a good point because I thought at the time, or I've thought for the last, 2 years, I'd say, that the way you exit the retool is you find the partner for Colton Parayko. I think that's how you exit on the defensive side. You know, their defense was such a question mark that they needed someone to find. They needed to get back to having their Petro and Bomeister kind of pairing. Yeah. And if Broberg works out, I mean, he played a little bit with Preco in the preseason or did some skating with Lions. I can't remember if they played in the preseason together or not. But you could see where they finally have figured that out. I think you're probably right. They're going to need somebody that becomes that guy with Robert Thomas. Now, I would argue that Jordan Kyrou is the guy that has the potential to be the 40-goal scorer. Now, consistently, I don't know. But, I mean, you look at what he's done so far. I mean, you look at the last 2 seasons for Jordan Kyrou. I mean, we mentioned had the slow start last year. Only had the 10 goals at the end of January, or beginning of January, excuse me. He had 31 goals last season. Jordan Kyrou 2 years ago had 37 goals. Like, he's right in that range to where if he gets off to a little bit faster start last year, it's reasonable to think that maybe he could have gotten back closer to that 30, 35-plus range. To me, he's probably the guy. But they don't want to play him with Robert Thomas. And
that's two coaches, by the way, that didn't want to play him with Robert Thomas. It's not just Bannister. Berube didn't want to do it either.
I would like to see them go back with it again. I know they've broken it up. I'd be shocked if they end up playing on the same line together tomorrow in their opener against Seattle. But I think that's the Batman and Robin right there. Now, the problem is do you want Kyrou and his lack of defensive mindset to be on a line where Robert Thomas is getting the most minutes? That's where it becomes difficult, and I don't know if he's ever going to become a great defensive player. But if you're not going to have him there, well, now we're in the spot where there's 2 of those scenarios that you're talking about. Now, the Thomas one is a little bit more of the focus, I would say. Yeah. Of you've got to find the Robin to Robert Thomas, and I don't think you have that guy internally. I don't think it's Jake Neighbors. I don't think it's going to end up being Jimmy Snuggerud. But for the same sense of on that second line where Kyrou's starting this season, well, he's like the Robin on that line. Who's his Batman? Because it's not Pavel Buchnevich, you know. Is it Dalibor Dvorsky? But I'm not going to get to see that for 2 years. So their roster, the way that it is built right now, and look, they're in a retool, so this is going to happen, especially as you kind of are still waiting to get those young guys in here and then start that transition into trying to become contenders. It feels like a roster right now that's not built to try and maximize your pieces.
Here's the thing because we're getting a ton of texts on the Air Comfort Service text line of Kyrou ? Kyrou's the guy. Kyrou needs to be the guy. At what point do you say Kyrou's not the guy? Because the last 2 seasons he has played the most minutes with Robert Thomas. And the expected goals per 60 minutes, 2.5, 2.4. And both seasons, they were broken up because it wasn't consistent for them. To me, they play different styles of hockey. Kyrou uses speed, and I don't mean speed in terms of puck possession and hockey awareness. I mean leg speed. Robert Thomas uses speed in terms of puck possession and hockey awareness. He's fast in the sense of you can't get the puck off of his stick, and he makes decisions quick enough. At times, they've looked great together. But at other times, they have been so off book with each other that it just looks sloppy on the ice. And you can't have that with Robert Thomas. You can't be searching for somebody to find a consistent chemistry with him. All of these guys that I just listed to you, with the exception of the Detroit Red Wings, those are all playoff teams. And I'm not just saying teams that get into the wild card. Nashville was, but that was the first season of O'Reilly and Forsberg. Everybody else was top 3 in their division. And you had a near 100-point player, and you had a 40-goal scorer. Can I take you through my line of thinking when I was doing this? You've got one more year of Kyrou before his no trade clause is up or comes into play. Mitch Marner is a free agent after this season. Now, I'm not trying to... This is all tinfoil right here, guys. There's no speculation. This is all tinfoil.
Well, clearly, because I don't see this one happening.
But at what point do you look at this and say, he's not the guy? He's not the guy to play up there. Maybe Jake Neighbors is, and that means Jordan Kyrou can be a second-line center or a second-line winger for them that could score 30 goals. But if you want to get out of this retool, you have to have a 1-2 punch at the top of the line every single night that they look at and they say, how are we going to stop this line? And I'm not sure the Blues have that because they're still searching for chemistry with Robert Thomas.
Who is it more on than that it doesn't work with those two, Thomas and Kyrou? Is that a Thomas thing? Is it a Kyrou thing? Like, we know what Kyrou is.
I mean,
right?
Thomas is putting up 86 points last season with like 7 different wingers.
Yeah, so why is it then he can't work with Kyrou?
If you're asking me, it's 2 different personalities on the ice. You've got a guy who desires puck possession, and you got a guy who desires rush hockey. And when you try and match those together, Now, look, what was that overtime Thursday night? That looked awesome because you had Kyrou jumping off of the bench with Thomas up in the offensive zone who held onto the puck and found a streaking Kyrou up the ice. That can work. But if you've got a guy who's taking a face-off in the defensive zone and your primary winger is off to the races looking for an outlet pass, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But Robert Thomas, at least from what I've seen these last couple of years, is all about taking the puck into the offensive zone and creating space and finding the open man. That's why Jake Neighbors was so good last season. That's why he scored 27 goals, because Thomas can hold on to the puck while Jake Neighbors takes the space in front of the net and you find a way to get the puck on the net.
I still think there might be something left in the tank for Jordan Kyrou. I don't think he's reached his full potential yet. Like, I don't think he has developed 100% as a player yet. And you mentioned Zach Hyman earlier. You look at his stats in Toronto. I mean, Jordan Kyrou right now is 26 years old going into this season. When Zach Hyman was 26 years old, he had 71 games that season with the Maple Leafs, had 21 goals and 41 points.
Wow.
Jordan Kyrou has been better than that offensively.
Yeah.
You know, pretty much the last 3 years. The difference is Zach Hyman was an established defensive player. Like, he was getting Selke votes, and they weren't a ton, but he was finishing top 25 in Selke voting in 3 years with Toronto. So he had the defensive side figured out a little bit. That's what Jordan Kyrou doesn't have figured out. It's like Jordan Kyrou sort of has the offensive side figured out to a point, and not the defensive side. And it was the opposite for Zach Hyman because he wasn't scoring as much, but he was still up in his plus minus and he was receiving Selke votes. Now look at today. I mean, Zach Hyman is a 54 goal scorer last season. He finished plus 36, but you're still seeing improvements from Jordan Kyrou. It's not pretty all the time, but he just went from being a minus 38 2 years ago to last year being a minus 12. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, he still has that offensive capabilities. I mean, he has put up 30-plus goals the last 2 seasons. He still has that offense. It's just, it felt like 2 years ago you established the fact that there's a problem there defensively. Last year you worked on that defensive problem, and then this year what you'd want to see is even more improvement, leaning more towards you're solving that defensive problem, and then you can focus more on doing what you're good at, which is scoring goals and, you know, being just solid defensively.
I think they have the pair. I've said this a lot. I think it's Thomas and Neighbors. I think that's your pair. But you need a shooter. You need a sniper. You need somebody who is always a threat to shoot the puck because that net front presence works. But if you don't have any, if you have a line that is too one-dimensional in terms of, I know what's going to happen. Thomas is going to skate in. He's going to circle. He's going to look for somebody. They're going to pass it, try and get it to the front of the net while Jake Neighbors is standing there and get a deflection. You got to have something that makes the defense look the other way. And that's a shooter. Could it be Kyrou? Absolutely. But I've seen this 2 seasons to where it hasn't worked and you've had to go elsewhere. And at some point you just have to sit there and say, maybe this isn't the line that's going to create the chemistry. Now, I think it's Booch and Neighbors, but they won't do it.
What I was going to say is if you put Booch on that line, now it all feels a little bit different. And that goes to my point of where you look at these line combinations running right now, it doesn't feel like they're maximizing the roster. You know, you don't have a real center with Jordan Kyrou, so how am I supposed to know if he is the 40-goal scorer if you're going to not have him play with Robert Thomas? Well, then also when I look at Robert Thomas, how am I supposed to maximize Robert Thomas when I don't know about the wingers that he's playing with right now? I'm a little lower on Neighbors than Alex is. Not lower in terms of he's not going to be an NHL player. I don't think he's a 40-goal scorer, and I'm skeptical of him being a 30-goal scorer. And then who's the guy that's with him? Right now it's Holloway. Like, okay, what am I supposed to make of that? How am I supposed to know what you have with your 2 highest paid forwards in Kyrou and Thomas when you're not setting them up, in my opinion, for success?
I'm getting a lot of texts on our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646, saying Mitch Marner is not a shooter. Guys, Mitch Marner in back-to-back seasons scored 65 goals and had 473 shots.
Most of those just hit him in the butt.
Very possible. The last 2 seasons for Kyrou, now shoots the puck, 272, 251, scored 52 goals. I'm not saying it's the right match. All I'm saying is you're looking for that one more piece to exit out of this retool, and it has to be with Robert Thomas. And going back to where we started, listen to Doug Armstrong's comment. My goal, his goal, is to get this team to the point where Robert Thomas is in conversations to win those awards. And we didn't even get to talk about him. We'll maybe do this tomorrow. Dylan Holloway might be that guy, too. I'm very curious of what that's going to look like on Tuesday against the Seattle Kraken. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, John Mozeliak spoke on KMOX yesterday and said what we've all been waiting for him to say.
We're going to get more talent?
Nope, not that one. But the question is he going to back it up? We'll discuss next on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. It was a weird weekend in college footballs. Upsets everywhere, including at College Station in Texas A&M, where the Aggies defeated Mizzou 41-10, and the Tigers fall to number 21 in the college football rankings. Illinois, who was idle this past weekend, moves to number 23. Tonight here on 101 ESPN, we'll have some NFL football for you. Monday Night Football here on 101 ESPN will be the Saints going to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. Pregame for that one will be at 6:30. And then tomorrow, the St. Louis Blues regular season gets underway. It'll be in Seattle against the Kraken. And pregame here on your home for the Blues, 101 ESPN, will start at 2:30. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
But I feel like we just have to be transparent and let people understand expectations. And so ultimately this offseason might look a lot different than maybe the previous 17 I've been involved in or 25 I've been involved in. And so, ultimately I still think we're going to have an exciting product to put on the field. I do think expectations for some of our younger players to take that step forward will definitely be our off-season focus. So we actually see that type of return when we get back on the field. But, it is going to be a different off-season.
What are we doing? Now we want to be transparent? Now the Cardinals need to be transparent. Where was this at the 3 press conferences that we had? The press conference and then the press conference following the press conference and then the presser following the press conference following the press conference. That was John Mozeliak, Cardinals president of baseball operations on KMOX, the Sports on a Sunday morning, yesterday talking about this upcoming offseason. That was a little tongue-in-cheek, a little Tony by me, but somebody's got to take that role on this show.
It was bad.
I just find that infuriating, and I would imagine a lot of Cardinals fans feel the same way, to where a press conference was just held about what this offseason is going to look like. And yes, they did answer some of the questions saying like, look, payroll will go down. We are updating the minor leagues. We are focusing on the youth movement. But then when specific questions were asked, there was no transparency. You've had multiple opportunities, not just in that offseason press conference, but throughout the season to be a little bit more transparent with Cardinals fans of where things are at and how things are trending in a direction that the Cardinals are focused on opening back up a competitive window. There hasn't been. Now, maybe most comments came following those press conferences that was a, look, that did not go over well with our fans, and we have to change the way we approach this with our fan base if we're going to enter into this refresh that they're calling it. It's just hard to sit there and after watching 3 different press conferences where there was zero transparency, and then now all of a sudden it's, well, we're going to have to be transparent about this upcoming offseason. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the word transparency, T-Bone. Maybe we need our guy Bradford Bruns here to explain that to me like I'm 5 years old.
If I got that one with my JUCO degree, we're good.
It doesn't bode well for what an offseason of uncertainty is going to look like when somebody's saying we need to be more transparent, and there hasn't been transparency for the last 3 years.
So I will say this. I do think that they are starting to become a little, just a smidge, just a little bit more transparent.
It's hard to go the other direction.
I mean, they said payroll's going down. Now, they're never going to give you the exact number on that because then they kind of lose leverage, right? If they say, oh, we got to cut $50 million in payroll this offseason, well, sure. Well, if that's the case, teams are going to look at Sonny Gray and go, I'm not going to trade you a great prospect. You've got to shed that salary. And maybe teams already know that. They might already know that, but, there's always the threat of, well, we can just hold on to Sonny Gray if we want to, and we can shed $50 million a different way.
Yeah.
So they're not ever going to give you the exact number of what they got to do. I actually kind of believe what they said at the press conference. At the time, I didn't, where they said, we really don't know what our revenues are yet for next year, so it's a little hard for us to know what we're going to be doing in the offseason, how much money we need to cut. Then we get the reports of the Diamond bankruptcy case to where they're not technically dropped yet, but it sounds like Bally's eventually is going to drop the St. Louis Cardinals. So I can understand that one now, of whether you want to believe they were blindsided or not is fair. But I think it's fair to say they probably don't know what their revenues are. But I think to your point on the transparency, where they need to get better at this is when they talk about this refresh, and their point of the reason that they had to cut payroll wasn't because of the RSN situation. The way that they kind of framed it at this press conference was, oh, well, we're going to put all of this into the minor. We're going to, we're cutting salary, or we're cutting payroll so we can reinvest in the minor leagues. Okay, well, all of us in this room knew immediately, well, you're not going to cut like $30 to $50 million and pour that into your minor leagues. And like best case scenario, my guess would be like $5 million. And even that feels a little high in my opinion. So that's where their transparency needs to be better. Okay, fans are willing to listen to taking a step back. But when you're talking about doing all these changes in the minor leagues of what we've got to do, what the direction is moving forward, that's where there needs to be a clearer picture. You know, they're basically telling you without telling you they're in a retool. Their version of a refresh. But there still needs to be a little bit better transparency of, you know what, we're not going to be competitive this year. They've said that. It sounds like that they're not expecting to be a team that's going to be competitive. But what are the changes that Chaim Bloom's making? You know, it's kind of unknown right now. All we know is that he's going to be adding to their minor league infrastructure. Okay, well, what does that mean? Is that just hiring new coaches? Is it bringing technology in? What exactly is Chaim Bloom doing that you guys are so confident in that is going to help this organization get back to becoming a development system that helps churn out talent, that helps the major league club? That they haven't been as transparent about, and that's where they do need to improve. I think they're getting better at it, to their credit, but it's still not at the level that it probably should be.
Look, you could call it a refresh. We all know what this is, but if you're about to enter a rebuild, you have to be transparent. There's no more of perhaps we need to be more transparent moving forward. No, you need to be more transparent moving forward, because if you want people to stay on board of this plan you have in place, and if the TV rights are gone and you're looking for direct-to-consumer streaming purposes to where people are paying for a subscription, if you're not transparent, people are out. People are out. And look, you've got 1 year of Mo, and then Chaim Bloom takes over. What does that look like? From what we talked last week with the Tampa Bay Rays insider and both the Boston Red Sox insider, they both said that Chaim Bloom is very upfront about things. Does he take a lot more time to make trades and decisions behind closed doors? Absolutely. But he's upfront and answers any question that you have, whereas I think that's gotten away from John Mozeliak over these last few years. All I'm saying is you can talk all you want about our minor league system and making sure that we're developing the younger players properly, and there's going to be changes in the major league roster, and we don't know what that's going to look like. At some point, you have to paint the picture of what this plan is and give people a little bit of hope and optimism from what it is. Because after those press conferences, there was no hope and optimism of what the future is going to look like. It was a lot of shoulder shrug. What's it going to look like? We'll find out. Right now, we just got to worry about the minor league system. There's got to be transparency for you of making sure what the future looks like for Cardinals fans. So let's get away from that, because, frankly, it's a little bit of a downer, T-Bone. You look sad right now.
Well, it's kind of sad.
Understandable. Probably the people that are just trolling me right now on Twitter because of my car backing the other direction in the garage.
Long summer.
It's going to be a very long summer. But
hey, we got a fun team.
You got hockey, though.
You know, Junior tells me it's a fun team.
Hockey's going to, yeah, Junior does. Well, Mo told you that, too. It's going to be an exciting young group of players. I'll tell you what's an exciting group of players. The San Diego Padres.
They are fun.
I don't typically miss Sunday night football games. I really like watching them. I did not turn that on once last night because the Padres and Dodgers game, I was glued to the television from start to finish. Of course, you had the stuff that was going on with Jerks and Profar, but Jack Flaherty is just basically cussing out Manny Machado at the plate after he's given up 4 runs. That is the best game series being played right now in Major League Baseball playoffs. And I'm not sure there is another rivalry in pro sports that matches the level that the Padres and Dodgers have provided, not just right now in the series, but throughout the regular season.
Yeah, I think Padres-Dodgers is the best rivalry going in baseball and the best rivalry going in professional sports right now. I mean, you just saw the hate yesterday on the field between those two teams. And Jack Flaherty's like new to this rivalry. You know, Jack Flaherty was acquired at the trade deadline from the Detroit Tigers. He's not a guy that's been with the organization for a long time. Mm-hmm. But you've got kind of that big brother, little brother aspect to it, where the Dodgers were always the bully of the National League West for the longest time, and the Padres start to spend this money by going out and getting a Machado, extending Tatis, signing all the free agent pitchers that they've had, and they try to get up there and they try to compete with acquiring Juan Soto was the same thing. They finally narrowly beat them in the playoffs in, I think it was 22 or 21, if I remember correctly. And ever since then, it's just felt like the Dodgers are now kind of feeling that pressure of the little brother is no longer the one that you can just kind of push around. The little brother is now going to give you a fight for your money. And that's what this series feels like. It's why I feel like it's the best case scenario for you to have if you're Major League Baseball as an NLDS series. Why? Because the National League Championship Series, the AL Championship Series, those sell themselves. You're 4 wins away from getting to the grand prize of them all, the World Series. The DS Series are the ones that can get a little bit boring. When you get the Dodgers and the Padres who just absolutely hate each other, it is must-watch television, to your point last night of, hey, sure, there was a Sunday night football game on, and I'm sure, no denying, a lot of people did watch the football game last night.
Yeah.
The baseball game was compelling television.
Totally.
Though it ended up becoming a blowout, it was fun to watch. You've got the rivalry that was there. You saw Flaherty yelling at Machado giving it right back to him. Profar's fighting with the fans. The fans are fighting with Profar. It was must-watch television. I think when they go to San Diego, it is going to be awesome.
I absolutely agree. I can't wait to watch the rest of that series. And by far the best series in this postseason right now. I think second would be Kansas City and the Yankees. I'll tell you the one that's not appealing at all is Cleveland and Detroit. I didn't even know that they played on Saturday for how boring that series truly is. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll dive into the junk drawer next year on 101 ESPN.
Open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
So if you missed questions and answers earlier today on BK and Ferrari, you can go back and check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, which is presented, as always, by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. We'll just rehash what took place earlier today because it's up on social media right now. You know, my great friend, my PIC, my producer in crime, Grant Francis, just decides to tweet out the picture of my illegal parking in the middle of the parking garage. No, look, I forgot to park
Parking's a strong word.
And also Mike Ryder's just walking through the building like, hey, see Ferrario's car? Hey, see Ferrario's car?
Listen, it's good content.
Great
Everybody
content.
should know.
Great content. Well, yeah, our teammate BK just found out on social media. Brooke Grimsley just found out on social media. All of it is in all caps response to the picture of, wait, this was you? Yes, it was me. I forgot to put my car in park. I hit the button to turn it off, and for some weird, miraculous reason, it turned off and just started rolling backwards in the parking garage. And again, huge shout out to the Creve Coeur Police Department and the building here at why am I blanking on the building's name right now?
City Place.
City Place. I almost said Centene Place, which is totally not it. But appreciate them for putting 2 2x4s underneath my wheel and stopping it before I had a disaster on my hands. But I'm sure I'm not the only one. Every one of you listening right now has had some type of disastrous moment with your vehicle, so let's bring it to the forefront. Guys, what have you done stupidly with your car?
All right, well, mine, the first one for me was when I had my old Ford Focus. One day when I got in the car, I was going to drive. This was when I was in high school. I was going to drive into work. So to give you an idea, I parked in the driveway at our home, and my dad's car was behind me. Well, for some reason, I forgot something, so I ran back in the house, quickly got it. I knew the car was there. I turned on music, but rather than kind of, backing out and avoiding the car, I just put the car in reverse and backed straight into my dad's car. Ran right into it, and for years never told my parents until I finally sold that car and we sold my dad's old car.
Get rid of the evidence and then you confess up.
And there was it put in not even a dent, but it broke off to where it was like a sharp edge. It separated the bumper midway in between a little bit. And my parents were always like, well, how did you get that? And I was like, I don't know. Someone must have hit me. But in reality, it was I hit my dad's
T-Bone's
car.
over here just drive T-bone people.
Yeah.
You've been T-boning people since you were 16 years old.
I ran right into that thing. The funny thing is something fell from out underneath it, and I went, he probably should know about that.
This doesn't
Never
go here.
became a big issue, so, it was fine. That's probably the worst one that I've had.
Were you an imbecile with your vehicle? Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I've had a couple. So I, at one point, struggled to back out of my garage.
What?
Well, so
hold up.
Back when I first got my car, it was a Buick Verano, and I was backing out of my garage. I had a backup camera, and the garage was halfway up, and the power went off. And so it stopped going up. But it was high enough to where my backup camera didn't see it. So as I was backing up, I was like, oh, I'm good. Backed right into the garage door because it had stopped. So that was the one time. And then the other time, I was just on autopilot mode, didn't really even look behind me, and I backed right into my dad's truck.
Nice.
The good news for my car is I ended up getting rear-ended a year later, so it had to all be replaced anyway. So, no, not really a big deal for me in the end. And it didn't even scratch my dad's truck because it's massive. So it was really just my car. So it all came out in the wash in the end. But, yeah, I'm more careful these days backing out of my garage.
Man, God bless the Air Comfort Service text line. Making me feel better right here. Look, forgot my son at home when I noticed looking back in my car, panicked, pulled the wheel, and sideswiped the median. Last job was a delivery driver. I was making a stop, forgot to put the truck in park, and by the grace of God, was able to notice it, jump back in to hit the brake right before it hit their company truck. I've had these before where, you just have so much going on, and you forget to either put it in park or you forget to turn your car off.
So it's not your first occurrence?
Not my first occurrence.
Someone just said, left my car running for an entire Blues game and didn't realize until I went out to the car after the game.
Oh, dude, I did this. So in high school, you could drive to Fox when you were a junior. So I had my license when I was a sophomore, but I couldn't drive there until I was a junior. And my first year when I was able to drive there, I had this old beat up Ford Tempo, parked it, and it was one of those old school ones that you had to manually lock and you had to manually turn the lights on and off. And this was in like the middle of the winter to where you have your lights on early when you're driving because, you know, getting to school at 7 a.m. I had left my lights on and went into school and left the car running. So not like in drive, like in the garage today, like it was like, you know, when you turn your key middle and it just turns the radio on, but it doesn't turn the engine on. I had that running with my lights on. And I went from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. at school. And I came out, the door was locked, the lights were on, and the car was running. I had to call a locksmith and AAA to come out and open my car door and then jumpstart my car door. It's like 16 years old. I apparently shouldn't drive. Now, I haven't had any vehicle problems since I was about 18 until today.
Yeah, someone
it was
said
a good run. It was a great run.
From the 314, and look, I've heard of hitting a trash can, never this one. My wife backed over our lawnmower. She felt it, but didn't get out. So then she drove back into the garage and ran over it again. Look, I've hit the garage, or I've hit the, not the garage, the garbage can that's out on the side before. Never like a lawnmower or anything like that.
We've all been there, ladies and gentlemen.
All been there.
All of us have done this at some point. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, what's more concerning for Mizzou after that loss to Texas A&M? Is it the offense or the defense? We'll give our answers next on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about Circa Sports Illinois. Look, we've got baseball action again later on tonight, which means, you know, I'm putting together a big Ferrario parlay with these two games. You've got the Tigers and the Guardians, and you've got the Royals and the Yankees. I've got a four-legger for you if you're curious. I've got the Tigers -1.5, and I've got the under in that game against the Guardians, and I've got the Royals +1.5 with that one hitting the over. The reason I'm doing that four-leg parlay over in the Circa Sports app is because I'm bringing in the most money possible. You lay $10 on that, you're bringing in $85. I do that same four-leg parlay on any other sportsbook app. I'm only bringing in $65. That's why you got to use Circa Sports for all of your betting needs, whether it's just those tight money line splits for single bets or you're going those high app limits, those future bets, because Circa doesn't keep money based off of it. They're limiting the amount of money that you're able to bring in. Everyone's getting the same limits, unlike other sportsbook where those players are limited. Plus, customer service, you're dealing with a real person rather than any type of robot. If you have issues, download the app today for all of your sports betting needs. If you or someone you know may have a problem with gambling, call 1-800-GAMBLER or text ILGAMB to 833-234. So what's more concerning for this Missouri Tigers team moving into their next matchup? Yes, it is against UMass. Yes, I'm sure a lot of Missouri fans aren't too concerned about UMass. But after the most recent one, I'd just be concerned in general. Is it offense or defense? And alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. This one's obvious for me. It's offense. I know defensively you've been giving up a lot of big plays, a lot of 60-plus yard touchdown runs or passes, and you're looking at this going, what the hell? This defense was supposed to be elite in the first 2 games against Murray State and Buffalo, and then all of a sudden, they can't stop anything, especially mobile quarterbacks when you saw it against Boston College and then with Texas A&M. And you're thinking, what's wrong with this defense? I don't care. Offensively, you were supposed to be one of the top teams in the SEC this season. There was talk about going into the year that Luther Burden was going to be in the Heisman conversation. There was talks of Luther Burden, and he might still be here, of being one of the best offensive players available in the draft of this upcoming season. And then we were talking about Brady Cook just building off of what he did last year and being one of the top quarterbacks, or at least somewhere in the middle of the SEC. And if you look at where they rank among college football playoffs, or not among college football teams, and this is all of college football, they're averaging 31.2 points per game. And right now, I think they've got a 428 yards per game. And that's in total. That's everything. Now, if you go to just the passing yards for the Missouri Tigers, you're looking at 249 passing yards per game. That's not what I was expecting. I gave them the grace of a couple of games. You know, you don't want to unveil your entire playbook early on. You figure you got to get on the same page with some of these guys, although they were the same weapons that Brady Cook had last year. Your offensive line was a little less as dominant as it was last year. All of that is beyond excuses anymore. Your offense has not shown the ability to have a blowout performance. You're still talking about Brady Cook and Luther Burden and that offense in general not being on the same page. The concern is your offense right now, because this has not gotten better off of last season. It's gotten worse from last season, and I don't know where it goes from here, because you've had your games where you felt like you could go out there and have a blowout performance, and maybe UMass is going to be it. But you think I'm going to buy into them being able to blow out Alabama or even Oklahoma or some of these other SEC teams? You've got to figure out something with this offense right now.
Yeah, I think the bigger concern for me is the offense. I mean, it just has felt off from the get-go. And again, we mentioned it at the time. Look, they put up the points. They did their job against Murray State, Buffalo. But there were still those missing on the deep balls downfield with Brady Cook. The accuracy was not there. He missed on a couple of them in plays that which should be big explosion plays. And I looked this up last night because I was curious. Because my first thought was, okay, maybe I'm overreacting to Brady Cook's lack of the passing success so far this season. So I looked this up. Brady Cook last year, how many games do you think he threw for over 300 yards?
Last year?
Yeah.
3.
5 times.
Wow.
3 in the SEC. 2 of those were in non-conference games, and I think both were in their big blowouts against the lower level opponents.
Okay.
Well, you know how many times he's thrown for 300 yards this season?
None.
Didn't do it against Murray State. Didn't do it against Buffalo. The most he's thrown for this year is 264 against Boston College. It's just, to your point, it has felt off all season long. They have not been a team that's been able to have the explosive passing plays. I think they only had, I think it was 2 or 3 in the game over the weekend against Texas A&M. And everything, too, the other weird thing about the offense over the weekend was it was all to the outside. They did not attempt to pass over the middle of the field based on advanced numbers that the SEC released after that game. It's just off. There's nothing that's been working for them offensively in terms of being explosive plays. And I don't think you can win games against SEC opponents without having a decent chunk of explosive plays. And I don't really worry about their defense as much. You know, they had their struggles against Vanderbilt, running quarterback. Boston College, we talked about it, struggled early on, but they ended up adjusting in that game. I have to wonder if some of that, the struggles this past weekend against Texas A&M, where, you know what, it's one of those games where it snowballed early and it was just going to continue downhill from there. And if we're being honest, part of this, and it's not an excuse for the defense, but I'm sure it did play a part of this. We talked about it last week. We thought they were going to start their backup quarterback. They ended up going back to the guy that started the game in Notre Dame that's more of a passing guy than a running quarterback, and he was fantastic in that game. I think their pass rush has a little bit left is been disappointing, but we kind of expected that. I think the defense is ultimately going to end up being okay. Not great, but it's going to be okay. The offense is the one that we talked about at times, and we even had a conversation about before the season started. Did Brady Cook have to be one of the top quarterbacks in the country to be a guy that could get this team to the playoff? And I thought maybe that was a little bit of a stretch, but they've got too many weapons for this offense to be struggling like this. Theo Weiss, Luther Burden, as you mentioned. I thought their running game going into that game prior to with Noel had been pretty good. I mean, he had 199 rushing yards in the game against Vanderbilt, 121 against Boston College. He did nothing.
That's what was
against A&M.
That was so infuriating, and I understand you got down by a lot quick, but like in the first quarter, it felt like, okay, well, at least this is close, and your passing game is not working. So it's like, why are you not running back to your running game? And then once the game got out of hand, it made sense. You had to throw the ball. Maybe just a tinfoil, and we could get into this with BK tomorrow because he's, of course, the Mizzou football guy. But I got to imagine if you're a defense, and this is why the defense wasn't as concerning to me as the offensive side of the game yesterday or Saturday. As a defense, when you know you're going out there every time your offense steps on the field in 3 and out, that's got to be infuriating. It's like you never get the opportunity to catch your breath or feel like, okay, well, they put us in a position to succeed. In the first couple of chances, now look, that doesn't excuse the first play of the game by Texas A&M to be able to come up with a big drive and then, of course, score. But then they force the field goal instead of give up another touchdown, and you're talking 10-0. But then it's just repetitive of 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. At some point, you got to score some points to give your defense an opportunity to breathe.
And to be fair, that's the first time that's been an issue for the offense. Because for the first 4 games, I don't remember what the number was exactly that Gabe DeArmond told us when we had him on last week, but it was like an unbelievable, like 60% of their drives, they get into opponent, or 70% of drives, they get into opponent territory, and they're settling for field goals, which that didn't happen against A&M. A&M just kicked the crap out of you.
Right.
But it is telling that the offense isn't finishing these drives. They aren't being explosive. Everything does feel to the outside. It does feel short. It does feel quick and simple, which, you know, to an extent, you do want to get the ball to your playmakers so you can allow Luther Burden to catch the ball, and then because he is such a great athlete, he can turn a 1-yard reception into a 70-yard touchdown. Problem is right now it just all feels off for this offense, and they'll right the ship against UMass. UMass stinks. They're one of the worst teams in the FBS.
God, I hope that doesn't come back to bite them.
What will be interesting to see is that the game where you finally look at the offense and leave it going, okay, the points are there, the yards are there, but did you leave the game looking at the offense going, okay, Brady Cook and the wide receivers are finally on the same page? Then you can start to feel better as they get back into SEC conference play.
He's Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up at 15, we'll get back into the NFL because it sure looked like after this past week that the offense is officially back. So we'll discuss that and who the best team in the NFL is. But coming up next, you send us a scenario to our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. We'll tell you if we are in or out next on 101 ESPN. Well, you heard about my nightmare scenario today multiple times on the radio, forgetting to put the car in park, it rolling backwards. Thankfully, it didn't bump into anybody, but if that were to happen, that's why I have Tracy Bibb. It's not a matter of if something happens, it's when something happens, like that. And if it does happen, Tracy Bibb has you taken care of. And now is the time to give her a call if you're in Missouri or Illinois, because it's a hard insurance market right now. Allstate, they've got better rates and can write coverage for more situations, even when other companies can't write them for you. So you need to give Tracy a call today. I love using her. I've been using her for my family since 2016 for our car and home insurance. And Tracy's always there for you. It's that customer service that you've always got the agent available to you. She's always checking in with us, making sure that everything's okay. We understand what's underneath the umbrella that we have with our coverage, and making sure we understand what we're covered with. So give Tracy a call today. Tell her Alex Ferrario sent you, and she'll walk you through the process. Free non-committal quote, super simple. 314-328-4260. That's 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
Come on, man. Are you in or are you out? It's in or out with BK and Ferrario.
Ooh, 314-399-9646 is our Air Comfort Service text line. Also, our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. The Graveyard Chat, where things are up and running for us here on BK and Ferrario. You send us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out. I'll start this one off. Fellas, in or out? Dylan Holloway puts up similar numbers to Jake Neighbors' year last year. So last year, Jake Neighbors, 27 goals and 38 points. In or out? Dylan Holloway puts up 38 or more points this season.
I'm going to go out. I think what you're going to see from Dylan Holloway is going to be more in that 15 to 20 range. I don't think he's going to get up to 27 goals. I don't think we're going to leave this season having the same conversation we had about Jake Neighbors, which is, is he a 30 goal scorer this season? I think for Dylan Holloway, 15 to 20 is my expectation, so I think that's what you're going to end up looking at. And I think he's ultimately going to end up playing most of his minutes probably on the third line, not in the top six.
I'm going to go in on this one. He was producing in the playoffs last season. He had 25 games, only had 7 points, but again, he was playing on a fourth line role in Edmonton. He wasn't playing as much as a lot of the top end players were. I think if he gets opportunities playing up in the top six, which it seems like he is, at least early on, I could see him getting to 38 points on the season.
Yeah, I'm in on this one as well. I look 2 years ago, it was Brandon Saad who had 37 points in 71 games. He had 19 goals and 18 assists. You had Torrey Krug, who had 32 points, 7 goals and 25 assists. It really is going to come down to playing time with him, but I think he's going to provide consistency in your top six. I don't know who that other one is going to be, but if he gets consistent playing time in your top six, I think 38 points will be easy sailing for him. T-Bone?
Guys, in or out? Illinois will finish with a better record than the Missouri Tigers this football season.
In. I guess the question is, where are the two losses for Illinois?
Well, I didn't say make the playoffs.
No, I just said a better record. So I think Missouri is going to get one more loss, probably win out the rest of the way. So you lose to Penn State. Yeah, honestly, I could probably see him with an even record. because I think Illinois is going to beat Michigan. I don't like Michigan. Illinois is probably going to lose to Oregon. You beat Purdue, you beat Minnesota, Michigan State, Rutgers, Northwestern. I'll say in.
I'm going to go out on this. I think we're overreacting a little bit to Mizzou just because it's recent. You know, the blowout loss that they had this weekend, and it was bad. I think we're putting a lot of stock into that one game versus you look at the whole. I think they'll be fine long term. I don't think they're going to be falling behind Illinois this season.
I'm a big Illinois fan. I'm out on this. They're not finishing with a better record than Mizzou. I think when you look at Mizzou, probably 2 losses. I think they're going to be the underdog in the Alabama game. Worst case scenario, maybe there's 3. Maybe you lose to Oklahoma or there's a slip up along the way. When I look at the rest of the schedule for Illinois, they're going to lose to Michigan. Michigan's a terrible matchup for them. Though I agree Michigan's not very good, they're going to run the hell out of the football. And Illinois' defensive line, woof. At Oregon's a loss. I think they're going to lose at Rutgers. Rutgers is a very good, solid, 7-8 win team. It's going to be a very even matchup. I can see where they lose that game. I think Illinois, best case scenario, finishes 9-3. Worst case, you hope for 8-4. I think worst case scenario for Missouri is 9-3. So I think, as big of an Illinois football fan I am, and man, would I love it with all the expectations on Mizzou this football season. For Illinois to be a better football team than them to have a better record, I think you're still going to see Missouri finish with a better record. So I'm out.
Grant?
In or out on this one, stick with college football. A 3-loss team makes the playoffs this year.
Oh, God, I hope not. Out.
Yeah, I'm going to say out. Who's that 3-loss team that you're looking at?
So Georgia has lost to Alabama. Let's say Georgia loses to Texas, and they lose to one of either Tennessee or Ole Miss. You have 3 losses, but they're all against top 10 teams. At the time, they were top 10 teams.
I mean, it's going to be hard to see a Georgia team getting in with 3 losses if you have other. I mean, we said 5 SEC teams. If you've got 5 other SEC teams that only have 1 or 2 losses.
Here's my thing. Iowa State right now is in the top 12, and they're undefeated. I don't think Iowa State's going to be there at the end of the year, but let's say Iowa State is, undefeated at the end of the season. Do you really think Iowa State's a better football team than Georgia?
Do I think they are? No, but
their resume.
How would I justify putting an undefeated team out of the playoff conversation and a 3-loss Georgia team in?
The same way you justify Florida State not being in the playoff last year.
Yeah, I know they had injury issues. 4 versus 12, too.
I get it, but I mean, it's the same scenario. It's just a little bit, and I get 3 losses versus undefeated is a little bit different. But I mean, if you're talking,
here's the thing:
2-loss teams versus a 3.
If that happens, you got a problem with your playoff committee. I don't know how you can justify a 3-loss team getting in over an undefeated team, even if we all believe that undefeated team is a joke.
I don't think you're going to see a 3-loss team. I think you're going to see the SEC beat up on each other a little bit. But what I don't think you're going to see is multiple Big 12 teams beat up on each other to where you have multiple true playoff contenders out of the Big 12 be at 2-3 losses to be in that conversation. I mean, there's probably 2 teams that come out of the Big 12. Iowa State, probably one of them. They're a good football team. Let's not discredit them. Kansas State, another solid Big 12 team that's going to probably be contending for that conference title. You'll get 1 or 2 out of the ACC, probably 2, I would say, Miami and Clemson. And then it comes down to the the Big Ten and the SEC. And I don't think you're going to have multiple 2 or 3 loss teams, all that are kind of in that bottom portion there to where you look at it and say we have to judge the resume. I don't see a team with 3 losses getting in. I think you're going to get 3 teams with 2 losses that will get into the college football playoff.
And I do agree with you guys. I don't think a 3-loss team would make it, but I do see a scenario where maybe a 2-loss team that had 2 really, tough games and they lost them. I could see them making it in over a, undefeated team that played nobody, Yeah. I could see it.
All right, let's get to some of yours on the Air Comfort Service text line for the 636. In or out, Bennington finishes top 3 in Vezina this season. I mean, he should have finished last season.
Okay, is this should or is this will?
Well, this is will for this upcoming season.
Out. Because nobody gives him the credit that he deserves.
Yeah.
Should, yes. Will, no.
It's going to be tough for Bennington, especially if they are going to go really a 50-50 split now between he and Joel Hofer.
Yeah.
I mean, Linus Ullmark was in it last season, right? The top 3? No, it was Hellebuck, it was Bobrovsky, and who was the third one? Was it? Why am I blanking on this?
Well, when Omar did win the Vezina 2 seasons ago, it was a pretty solid split between him and Swayman still.
Thatcher Demko was the other one with that one. So it's going to be tough. Like, Bennington's going to have absurd numbers if you get in, if it's really a 50-50 split, which I do think they're going to be looking to get more reps for Joel Hofer to rest Bennington. I'll say out if it should, but I agree with Grant. If it should, he should be in the top 3 because his numbers will replicate it. I'm going to have to say out.
I'm going to say out as well. I can see where we see a potential step back from Jordan Bennington this season. Not significant to where we're questioning if he's the starter for the St. Louis Blues. I mean, he overperformed last year. I can see where it kind of normalizes back down to what you're expecting. And if that's the case, I just don't know if he's going to be a guy that's in the top 3 Vezina conversation.
Yeah, when Omar won the Vezina, he played 49 games.
Yeah, and look at his numbers. I mean, they were elite. So if you're going to do that, you're going to have to be one of the best, if not the best, goaltender in the National Hockey League if you play that few amount of games. In or out, Mizzou will bench Cook at some point before the end of the season.
Out.
Can't bench him.
I don't know if they have. I don't think they've got a better option than Brady Cook. And
you're going to ride or die
guy.
with Cook.
Yeah, I think he's the guy. I think it's just a matter of, can he finally get on the same page with these receivers? We saw it last year. You know, they had an explosive offense last year. They were hitting some of those deep shots. This year, it's a little off. I still think that can be corrected. Now, they're running out of time to do that, but I still think it can be. But I don't see them benching him, so I'm out on this.
Yeah, and I agree, too. Like, you just look at last year, and I know, like I said, the recency of what just happened this past weekend makes, everybody's opinion a little bit down on Mizzou, and rightfully so. But you look at what Brady Cook has done over the last, year, and, one game's not, or a stretch of games where he hasn't played great isn't going to define what Mizzou tries to do. If they're going to actively try to make the playoffs, it's not going to be without Brady Cook.
Let's get to a couple more. In or out from the 618. Ryan Helsley throws another pitch in a Cardinals uniform. Out. I don't see any scenario where he is a Cardinal to start this season.
I don't either.
That's your best trade chip. If you're slashing payroll, fine. But man, if you're trying to get better with younger players, that's the piece you do it with.
Yeah, and if you're having a refresh where you know you're probably not going to be as competitive, why hold on to a closer that's on the last year of his deal?
Totally.
You're not going to be winning as many games. It's not as valuable. So I'm out. I'm in. I don't think he throws another pitch for the St. Louis Cardinals. And his salary arbitration, MLB Trade Rumors just kind of released their projections. He's at like $7 million.
Yeah.
Which
that's going to be a
isn't
steal
bad,
for another team.
100%.
Yeah.
So somebody's going to trade for him. And you're going to get a good haul for him. So I'm in. I don't think he throws another pitch.
We're both out because they said Ryan Helsley will throw another pitch. So we're both out.
Yeah.
With Grant Francis and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, it sure feels like after the 5th week of the NFL that the offense is officially back. We'll discuss that and who the best team in each division truly is next on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care, who just got off of a no overtime weekend because they're always taking care of you, the customer. I've been with them since 2016. They've been making people comfortable since 1926. And look, with this weird weather where we had a hot weekend and now you're going back into the 70s and the low 60s overnight, you want to make sure your HVAC system, your heater is in great shape. And that's why you need to be a part of their maintenance agreement program. What this is, twice a year, Classic Air Care will come out. They'll check your unit before you flip it on for the summer, flip it on for the winter. They'll fine-tune it. They'll clean it. They'll make sure you're good to go for the next season. And this is the best part. If there's any issues in between those two visits, you're at the top of their priority list for being a part of their maintenance agreement, which means they'll get out there faster and take care of your issue sooner. Give them a call today, or you could schedule online and sign up for that maintenance agreement. All you got to do is just tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. It's Classic Air Care, and it's classicaircare.com.
Grant Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Mizzou, one of the upsets in the SEC this weekend. They were blown out at Texas A&M 41-10 the final as they fall to number 21 in the college football rankings. Illinois, who did not play this past weekend, moves to number 23. So from the college football weekend to the NFL that will wrap up tonight, this week in the NFL, Monday Night Football. And you'll hear it right here on 101 ESPN. Will be the Saints traveling to Kansas City to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. Pregame here on 101 ESPN tonight, starting at 6:30. And then tomorrow, the Blues will kick off their regular season as they'll be in Seattle to take on the Kraken. Pregame for that, it's an early one. It'll be at 2:30. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Along with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Final game of Week 5 in the NFL is later on this evening. You've got the Chiefs and Saints, which you can hear all of that coverage right here on 101 ESPN pregame coverage beginning at 6:30. Now, barring the outcome of that one, plays into my stat a little bit here, T-Bone, but it sure seems like after watching this week that the offenses are starting to make a comeback. We've talked a lot about it. BK's brought up the numbers of how significant the drop-off has been on the offensive side and wondering if it's just a outlier or if this is the new common theme in the NFL. So I looked at this earlier today. This past week, and again, depending on what happens tonight, could play into this, there have been 5 games in Week 5 that had 35 or more points scored in them by a single team. Prior to this one, in combined of 4 weeks of the NFL, you had 9 total games where a team scored 35 or more points. It breaks down where 3, 2, 2, and 2. And now you're talking about 5, potentially 6, depending on if the Chiefs or Saints put up that type of numbers. To me, it plays into what we talked about. Yes, it's weird that that's happening. It just felt like it was a result of the lack of starters playing in preseason action. And it just felt like a lack of consistency with your offense. And now that you're 5 weeks in, now that you've shaken some of those cobwebs off, you're starting to see the offense break through. I mean, Cincinnati is a perfect example of it. We started the first 2 weeks wondering this offense is broken. And now you see them go out there and put up 38 points where Burrow's thrown almost 400 yards. Baltimore does the same thing. Jacksonville puts up 37 to another offense that seemed broken. It sure seems like your offense has started to figure itself out, and now we're going to see that high-flying playmaking ability that we wondered if it was coming.
Yeah, I know we talked about it, that the offense was way down in the first 3-4 weeks of the regular season. To me, it always felt like at some point you're going to start to see offenses figured out. And I think this was the weekend that it finally was, okay, it's starting to click together. I mean, you just mentioned the 35 points number. We had 8 quarterbacks so far with 2 games to go, and there's a chance Mahomes and Carr could do it tonight. Yeah. 8 quarterbacks threw for over 300 yards this weekend. And you got 5 that did it last weekend, or in week 4, the previous week. So you're starting to see these offenses start to figure it out. I think you're 100% spot on. I think it's just the lack of reps for a lot of starters. It takes a minute for these offenses to get back, because when you think about offense, it's more of a rhythm and timing thing. You know, you want to hit the wide receiver, especially like you think of the back shoulder throw. You want to throw that ball and hit him basically the moment he turns around, the ball is basically at his hands. Otherwise, it's going to be a ball that can be broken up or picked off. It's less timing with the defense and more reactionary, and I think that's what we saw in the first couple of weeks is these offenses were a little out of rhythm, didn't get to play in the preseason, running through these new plays that they've got in their playbooks, or a new playbook, depending on what your offensive coordinator is. And I think you're now seeing that the offenses are starting to find the rhythm. You're going to start to see more of these 300-yard passing games, offenses putting up 25, 30-plus points a game compared to these defensive slugfests that we saw early on. This is kind of what I expected now. We'll see if it ends up getting back to more of the, by the time we get to the end of the season, if it gets back to more of what we were expecting or if it ends up being a little bit lower. But I'm expecting more of these games as we get going in the NFL season to not look at them and go, oh, man, these offenses. Instead of going, wow, these offenses. Look at how they're putting up all these points and how they're throwing for all these yards.
What team do you guys believe has put up the most points so far
through 5 weeks of play. Now, again, could change depending on what takes place later on tonight, although I don't expect the Kansas City Chiefs to put up 70 points, and I also don't anticipate the Saints to putting up 40 points. But what team has scored the most points through 5 weeks?
I'm going to guess Minnesota.
No.
See, that was going to be my first
Minnesota
thought, too.
has put up, and I'm going both AFC and NFC combined. If you're going NFC, they put up the second most points. If you're going AFC, they put up the fifth most points.
Is it Tampa? They've put up a ton of points.
No.
Hasn't Detroit scored a lot of points?
Nope.
I have no idea then.
Washington Commanders.
Wow.
They have put up 155 points so far through 5 weeks. Here's the list of most points scored by a team. You got Washington at 155, the Ravens at 147, Bills at 142, and then you get to the Vikings at 139, Buccaneers at 127. Kind of leads me into my next point. Are the Washington Commanders the best team in the NFC right now? We've talked about San Francisco struggling. We've talked about Philadelphia not looking any better than what we thought they were. Dallas barely got out of that win last night with Pittsburgh. I mean, I guess you could argue Atlanta, but Atlanta didn't start off well. And I know the Vikings are 5-0, but guys, the Sam Darnold experience started to go south last night. Or not last night, yesterday afternoon.
Be fair, he got hurt.
Totally, but in the first portion of it, like their offense was scored by a defensive pick six, and then you had a running game that, what was it? It was C.J. Ham that scored that touchdown. I mean, is it outlandish to say that the Washington Commanders might be the best football team right now in the NFC?
I'm still going to say no. I think the best team in the NFC, and I have changed my tone a little bit here because I think 2 weeks ago when we talked about this, I still said, hey, it's San Francisco. I think the best team in the NFC is probably Detroit. I get it, Minnesota's 5-0. I still think the Darnold experience is going to end up working out well. I don't believe in that when you get to the playoffs. They've got maybe the best defense in the NFC. I think the most well-balanced team in the NFC, though, is the Detroit Lions. Defensively, I still think they've got a little work to do on the defensive side of the ball, but offensively it looks smooth. They got the two-headed monster running back in Montgomery and Gibbs. They've got two legitimate weapons at wideout. You know, we always talk about St. Brown. Yeah. Williams has been awesome so far this season, and they've got one of the best tight ends, if not the best tight end in football, in Sam Laporta. And Jared Goff is the perfect guy for that offense. So for me, it's the Detroit Lions. I think for the Commanders, I know I think BK mentioned this when he, spoiler alert, picked, I can't remember if he picked Washington or the Browns. I think he picked the Browns in our Pick'em Challenge. They haven't played anybody in my mind. You know, they lost at the Bucs. I don't know if the Bucs are that great. They beat the Giants, who are bad. They beat the Cardinals, who to me, they're the Spider-Man meme. They're the same team in my opinion. And they beat the Browns, who I think are awful. This is the weekend. We'll find out. They take on the Baltimore Ravens on the road. If they beat Baltimore on the road this weekend, now I'm more willing to have the conversation as they're the best team in the NFC. I think right now what they've ended up happening is they ran into the Bengals at the right time, and they ran into the Cardinals, who are the exact same as them. I think they're probably going to end up being a 8-9 win team right around 500 this season. I don't think they're the best in the NFC.
Do they have the best quarterback in the NFC?
Now, that's a conversation that I'm more open to. I still think when we look at the NFC,
I think they might have the best quarterback in the NFC. I mean, Jordan Love, probably. He was hurt for one game, but he didn't look all that great. Kirk Cousins struggled in the first couple of weeks. Dak hasn't looked good. Jalen Hurts has not looked good. I mean, Geno Smith has been putting up points, but it hasn't been anything that's been setting the world on fire offensively. It's him and Sam Darnold right now that are the best quarterbacks in the NFC. And I'm sorry, I'll go with the upside of a Jaden Daniels over than what I know Sam Darnold is.
I think he's going to finish the end of the season fourth in the NFC.
Who's ahead of him?
I think you're going to have people are going to disagree with this because they're not playing well. I think he's been fantastic. They're hurt. I think Stafford's going to be ahead of him by the end of the season. I think Jordan Love's going to be ahead of him by the end of the season. And I think the other one that's going to be ahead of him is probably Jared Goff still. I think he's going to be fourth. Again, I don't believe in what they are right now, and that's why I'm a little bit lower on him. But, I mean, it is pretty telling that we're already saying, like, hey, I think he's the best quarterback in the NFC East. I think he's better than Caleb Williams right now at this point. He's better than every quarterback in the NFC South. And outside of Matthew Stafford, I think he's better than every quarterback in the NFC West. He's right there with probably Kyler Murray, who's been fantastic so far this year. I think he'll be a top 5 quarterback in the NFC by the end of the season.
The other thing about the Commanders, too, and someone brought this up in the YouTube chat, is their defense, which has allowed the 5th most points in the NFC so far. So, I mean, they've allowed 115 points. Their offense has obviously kept them alive in all these games.
Shotgun offense.
But against these opponents that aren't really great opponents, they've allowed that many points, and that's a red flag for me. But, I mean, looking to the immediate future, like their next few games, they've got a pretty easy schedule. Like aside from Baltimore, who's coming up next, obviously, they then go on to play Carolina, Chicago, and the New York Giants. Yeah. So they could very easily be, 4-2 if they lose to Baltimore, and then 5, 6, 7-2 after the first 9 games.
They kind of remind me of. I know we got to get a break. They remind me of Jane Daniels' team last year. Yeah, LSU. To where you look at them, and you're like, man, they can really put up points.
But it's all because of Jaden Daniels.
Yeah. And then you look at the defense and you go, ugh. Boy, they're going to have to win a lot of shootouts. And that's where I can't buy into you as the best team if you got to win a bunch of shootouts. And maybe that will make it to where I will raise my stock on Jaden Daniels as we get further into the season.
We'll find out. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Again, you got Chiefs and Saints tonight. Pregame at 6:30 here on 101 ESPN. We'll take our final break. We'll come back. We'll rewind it because we got some lines out at Blues practice prior to their first night against the Seattle Kraken. Have they changed? We'll discuss next on 101 ESPN.
Run it back with the Daily Rewind on BK and Ferrario. Brought to you by Gloria Lou, your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
Along with Graham Francis and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario as we hit today's BK and Ferrario Rewind. If you missed anything from our show today, you can check it out up on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com. As always, presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Fast lane coming up in just a bit. But real quick, we'll rewind it because Matt DeFranks, he's giving us some hockey lines for the opening night tomorrow against Seattle.
It's back.
Oh, it's so back. We should play Guess the Lines right here. Grant, hit the open. We don't even know where that open is.
I've lost it.
So, look, it's practice. Things could change, but I think you're seeing what the opening night lineup is going to look like. And it had Zach Bolduc as the extra forward. Kapanen was playing on your third line. It was Holloway with Thomas and Neighbors, Texier with Buch and Kyrou, and then your fourth line was Foxa with Toropchenko and Nathan Walker. And your defense had the third pair of Ryan Suter with Matt Kessel. That's it. That's it. That's your lineup. You've got the extra forward, and I know a lot of people saw that and were commenting of, if Bolduc's not in the top six, why is he on this roster? He's a placeholder until Brandon Saad or Oscar Sundqvist are available for this team. And I do anticipate Bolduc playing either Thursday or Friday in the top six. I think right now it's going to be you get one rep at it, and then you'll go back to the AHL when Saad is back and say, go be the top player down there, and we'll see you back up here in a couple of months. And what I find also interesting is Perunovic and P.O. Joseph. P.O. Joseph makes sense. I don't know what role Perunovic plays on this squad as an eighth defenseman, but he is the eighth defenseman for the Blues going into opening night.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of how all that plays out with Bolduc. And it's not like he's missing a lot, right? There's not one guy you can look at that says, well, it's better off just to have him sit in the press box. Yeah. It's going to be potentially 2-3 games. And Springfield's season doesn't start until Saturday. So if he ends up going down after these first 3 games, there's a chance he even plays in the home, I don't know if it's home opener or away, but he plays in the season opener for the Springfield Thunderbirds, which is on Saturday. So you're not missing out a lot. He gets to be there, work with the NHL staff. And you know what? He had a good camp. I mean, Drew Bannister said it. He had a good camp, but he didn't continue to get better. Kind of stalled out a little bit. Wasn't a bad camp. Earned the award, get to go on the first road trip with the team, can learn with the coaching staff a little bit. I don't think it's the end of the world that he's the extra.
Kapanen outplayed him. Yeah. That's the bottom line.
He's on the second power play unit, by the way, too.
Kapanen was? Makes sense. Kapanen outplayed him.
And now quarterback.
Yeah. So, and Zach Bolduc is just going to, he's probably going to get one game between now and Friday. And then by Saturday, like Tebow mentioned, he's going to head down to the AHL. So we'll wait to find out tomorrow, 3:30 puck drop, 2:30 our first community pregame show. We'll talk plenty more Blues. I've got my Ferrario 5 bold predictions for tomorrow. So get ready, ladies and gentlemen.
Spicy.
Hockey season is back. Got football tonight, Chiefs and Saints. Grant Francis doing a great job helping us out today. For T-Bone, for Grant, I'm Alex. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 11 a.m. right here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.